Welcome, everyone. I now call the October 11th, 2022 regular City Council meeting to order. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The City of Bothell is now providing the option of attending council meetings remotely or in person. Public comment will be allowed both in writing or verbally. Verbal comments may be taken either in person or remotely. Sign-up sheets were provided online by the City Clerk's office via link from the agenda. A call-in number was provided on the meeting agenda for members of the public who wish to call in by phone to listen live to the meeting. If you have called in, we ask that you mute your device so as not to interfere with the meeting. If a participant fails to mute their connection and causes a disruption to the meeting, the connection will be terminated. At this point, we'll take a moment to take roll of the council members by position number. Please say here when the City Clerk calls your name.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Zorns.
Here.
Mayor Thompson.
Here.
Councilmember Alders.
Here.
Councilmember McNeil.
Here.
Councilmember Mankey.
Here.
Councilmember Dodd.
Here.
And Deputy Mayor Alcabra.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to reiterate some meeting guidelines. For all remote meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when not speaking. For council attending remotely, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom when you wish to speak, and I will call on you. And I'm going to skip the next two because we're all here. The first item on the agenda is meeting agenda approval. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we're going to move on to presentations, reports, and briefings and public engagement opportunities. October 15th and 16th is Orca Recovery Day this weekend. You can sign up for a local restoration-related volunteer event to help increase the food supply for southern resident orcas by improving salmon habitat. You can learn more at bothellwa.gov/orcaday2022. We also, on Saturday, have the Fire Prevention Week open house and ribbon cutting. We're going to do an annual open house at fire stations 45 and 44, and festivities will begin with the Fire Station 45 ribbon cutting happening at 9:30 a.m. You can learn more at bothellwa.gov/Fire Prevention Week. We've got the Skeptic Sense Workshop Wednesday, October 19th from 6 to 8 p.m. Septic. Hey, some of us just want to know why. There's nothing wrong with that. Join this free online workshop to learn how to maintain and extend the life of your septic system. You can learn more at bothellwa.gov/septic sense. I really would have gotten confused when I got to that part in the sentence. All right, we have one proclamation, which is Hindu American Awareness and Appreciation Month. And thank you all for coming out. Whereas Hindu American Awareness and Appreciation Month seeks to bring local awareness, recognition, and acknowledgement of the significant contributions made by Hindu Americans across the United States. And whereas Hindu Americans represent diverse ethnic backgrounds, including individuals of Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Malaysian, Indonesian, Afghani, Nepali, Bhutanese, Sri Lankan, Fijian, Caribbean, and European descent, and whereas our nation has greatly benefited from Hindu Americans, especially through the Vedanta philosophy, Ayurvedic medicine, classical Indian art, dance, music, meditation, yoga, literature, and community service. And whereas the year 2022 marks the 129th anniversary of when Hinduism was officially introduced to the United States at the 1893 World's Parliament of Religions in Chicago, while October holds significance as the birth month of Mahatma Gandhi, and often where major Hindu holidays such as Navratri and Diwali are celebrated, and whereas Hindus are primarily an immigrant community, and most Hindu immigrants come as students in search of better economic opportunities or to unite with family members, while others have arrived after facing religious persecution in their countries of origin, and whereas Hindu Americans share the entrepreneurial spirit of America and contribute to economic vitality, growth, and well-being, and whereas despite their positive contributions, Hindu Americans face stereotypes and misconceptions about their heritage and have been the targets of bullying, discrimination, hate speech, and bias-motivated crimes. Now therefore I, Mason Thompson, do hereby proclaim October as Hindu American Awareness and Appreciation Month in the city of Bothell to increase understanding of the Hindu American community and celebrate the influence of the extraordinary cultural, ethnic, linguistic, and religious diversity of our residents has on our city. And I believe we should applaud you. That's how this should go. And I believe we have Chandra, Rohit, and Shiva here to accept tonight, and I'm going to give this to you guys and let you say a few words.
On behalf of Hindu American community, I accept and thank you, Mayor Thompson, City Councils, and then city staff for processing and awarding the proclamation during the festive season of Navaratri and Diwali. So very happy because Bothell is representing a large amount of a Hindu community and along around Redmond, Bellevue, and other cities. So this is the first city which is doing the proclamation, and then we're happy to come and then appreciate your front-ending and then showing the leadership. The proclamation sends an impactful and meaningful message to the Hindu American community in Bothell and nearby cities and help educate all Americans about our incredible traditions. Over the last few years, there has been a significant growth of Hindu American in the region, and we have been contributing to all aspects of public life to our vibrant and diverse social fabrics. It would bring all residents immense pride and gratitude to know that the city recognizes the contributions of Hindu Americans here. We are happy to share that the Hindu American community, in collaboration with various community organizations like WATA, WATS, ICC, TTA, SMM, Sai Baba Temple, and Hindu Temple and Cultural Center, HTCC of Bothell, is engaged in driving a service initiated called Seva Diwali, a food donation campaign during these festive seasons in Bothell, and contribute back to local food banks and underserved in our neighborhood. During the pandemic, these 15 to 20 Indian organizations led by the Hindu Americans served food for the homeless. We did a food drive every month in the last 2 years. And then we did more than 10 to 15 blanket drives, and we helped in the homeless shelters. So we would love to continue our contribution to the local community because this is our home. And we once again, I would like to thank you for the proclamation, and we look forward to continued engagement with City Council on various community services initiatives. We also taking a step forward to invite you to come and attend our events. The community have grown too much. Recently we have done a Bathukamma, a flower festival coming from a south region of India. There were 2,000 people who were attending it, and Manka Dingra and a couple of city council members came from different cities. But we request you to please come and join us and learn more about us and teach us as well. But thank you very much once again.
And thank you all. And we don't expect you to stay for the whole meeting, so don't feel bad, okay? All right, next up we have were there?
Is it okay if we take one picture?
Oh, yeah.
Just wanted to.
So everybody come over here?
Without question.
You can stand there and we'll just stand here and take one picture.
It's about to get lonely in here. Yeah, thank you. All right, now, next up is City Manager Report. Kyle?
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. I'm now regretting that we didn't change the order of the agenda, so I didn't have to follow something so great, but here we go. I just want to amplify one of the things that you mentioned in terms of the opportunities to be out for public engagement, and that is just to really reiterate the opportunity for the open houses at both fire stations, and in particular the ribbon cutting at 9:30 on Saturday at our new fire station 45. And really it's an expression of gratitude to the community for voting and approval of a voter approved bond that made that happen, as well as to the staff that made that happen. So grateful for our teams in Public Works and Fire and beyond for all the work that went into, and again, from councils past and present for the leadership making it happen. So hope to see a good turnout, and who doesn't want to go tour a fire station or two, right? That's a good way to spend your Saturday. So looking forward to that. The other thing is last week we got to focus on welcoming Councilmember Dodd to the City Council, and there's a flip side of that, which is that it also creates a vacancy on the Planning Commission, and we didn't talk about that. And I've had a few questions, so I just wanted to note, to make sure that everyone in the community is aware, and the council as well, that as defined by the council protocol manual, the plan is that staff will be reaching out to post about the vacancy. The protocol manual talks about a 30-day period of at least a 30-day filing period with dates to be determined, and the city clerk's office is working on that, and we'll have it out soon. The rest of the procedure is laid out in protocol section 28A or page 13, which sometimes is easier to find too. At the same time, there was actually also a vacancy on the Arts Commission, and we knew there was at least a 2/3 chance that we might have a vacancy on the Planning Commission, so held back on that. But so both of those positions will get posted, and the clerk's office will be scheduling more information to bring back to council, so you're aware of when the interviews will take place, et cetera. So just wanted to put that on people's radar and assure folks that we'll be moving forward and making sure that all of we're going to have a more robust discussion about boards and commissions later tonight, but in terms of vacancies, that those ones are taken care of.
There it is. Fantastic. Thank you. Next up is Council Committee Reports. Councilmember Mankey.
Thank you, Mayor. The Public Safety Committee of Council met last week with Snohomish County Fire District 10. This was our first meeting this year, and I don't believe we're meeting till next year, but a couple of topics that were discussed were District 10 purchased a brush truck to assist in wildfire fighting, so that's a great thing. And then we discussed the open houses this weekend at both Station 44 and Station 45. Station 45 will have a time capsule built into the wall with a smattering of items put together by the fire commissioners from District 10. So if you go to that open house, be sure to look for that in the wall.
That's a good tip. I didn't know that. Councilmember Aldrichs.
I have several updates from various committees I'm on. I think this is going to kind of go most recent to the past. I recently attended the East Side Transportation Forum, and we were treated to presentations on upcoming updates to both the port and the airport. SeaTac's about to get fancy. So check it out. Also, today, there was a North King County Town Hall with King County Homeless Regional Authority, and that was a presentation where a 5-year plan was shared, updates were given, and sort of an overview of the regional efforts being made to address homelessness in our area. And they were gracious enough to share a few minutes with me, and I spoke about local efforts and how Bothell's worked regionally on addressing homelessness. Also, K4C is getting ready for the legislative session, and they have recommendations that they're making to the legislature that would address the impact of climate change. And I also attended the public safety meeting that Councilmember Mankey spoke about. That's the extent of my updates.
Councilmember Dodd.
I have not been assigned to any committees, but thank you.
All right, moving on to visitor comment. The city has accepted visitor comment in writing as well as accepted sign-up sheets for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting. Written comments submitted to the city clerk no later than 3 p.m. today were forwarded to all city council members and are part of the record. City clerk, do we have anybody signed up?
Thank you, Mayor. No, we did not have anyone sign up either written or requesting to speak. However, I do see a few members in the audience tonight, and we also have a few on the Zoom call. So for those on Zoom, if there's anyone wishing to speak, please use the raise hand feature. And if there's anyone in the audience here in chambers, if you'd like to have your 3 minutes, please raise your hand. And it looks like we have no takers tonight.
All right, thank you. Moving on to projected agenda discussion. Does anybody have an item they would like to discuss? Seeing none, I'd look for a motion to approve the consent agenda. Councilmember Dodd?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, I have a motion from Councilmember Dodd and a second from Councilmember Zorns to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? City Clerk?
Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alders?
Yes.
Councilmember McNeil?
Yes.
Councilmember Mankey?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Thank you. All right, moving on to our first agenda bill of the night. It's Agenda Bill 22143, a public hearing to consider ordinances establishing 2023 user rates for the water, sanitary, sewer, and storm and surface water utilities and clarifying utility billing process. I am going to open the public hearing and turn it over to City Manager Stannard.
Thank you, Mayor. And if you hadn't noticed, we're starting to see a theme emerge. It is budget season. And so the last few meetings, we've had some items that are coming as a precursor to next week, as well as when we really start digging into the preliminary budget that I'll be bringing forward. And so while we've covered CFP, tonight is an opportunity to learn a little bit about more about utility rates and the assumptions there, and then also hold the public hearing. Just for clarity, council is not being asked to approve tonight. That'll be coming back in November, but tonight is an evening for information, and again, to hear from anyone in the community who wishes to speak. With that, I am going to turn things over to Boyd Benson, our Public Works Utility and Development Services Manager, to guide you through the process.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight we'll be providing information to support the public hearing for the 2023 proposed water, sewer, and stormwater utility rates. Tonight we have with us Tage Acker from the firm FCS Group, who will be assisting. Tage, would you like to give a brief description of your company?
Sure, yeah. I work at FCS Group. We're a local Redmond, Washington-based consulting company. We help cities and counties in particular, specifically in the Northwest, with water, sewer, stormwater type utility rate studies. And so for the information you're looking at tonight, we helped city staff by providing a second set of eyes and input based on other rate studies that we're doing concurrently with other clients of ours.
Thank you. So just a quick overview of the utilities. The utilities are enterprise funds. That means that revenue and expense from and into and out of the utilities are for utility work only. There are some transfers to the general fund to support with respect to utility excise tax and the rest. We look at short and long-term rate forecasts and fund forecasts, both expense and revenue. So we look at the short term, the 2-year biennium, but we also look at a 7-year snapshot with respect to the capital facilities plan. And this is to ensure that we can provide ongoing day-to-day operations, cleaning sewer mains, paying for water purchase and wastewater treatment, and also to complete projects to improve the utility system in accordance with our adopted plans. And these are things that are set out to make sure that we have good long-term sustainable utilities. So what you see before you tonight, staff's recommending a 6% increase for the water utility, a 2.5% increase for the sewer utility, and a 6% increase for the storm and surface water utility. We'll go through a little bit on some rate background and then look at each utility. First, I'd like to give you a general overview with respect to milestones. As part of the 2021 biennial update, budget update last year, we looked at the utility expense revenue and forecast very closely, and that was respect with the previous 21-27 CFP. At that time, we looked and observed some long-term decreases in revenue and available funds due to our work in the utilities, and we recommended a 6% utility rate increase for each. That was approved by City Council, and it went into effect January 1, 2022. Through the actually first, second, and third quarter of this year, we've worked on the capital facilities plan update to identify which projects should be constructed and funded over the next 2 years in the full 7-year span of the facilities plan, and looked at the budgets as well for these utilities. Tonight, as City Manager Kyle summarized, we're looking to have a public hearing, get comment, hopefully close the hearing if that works out for council, if we're able to address those issues, and if not, we can come back and address those at a future date, and then come back in November for a decision with the rates going to effect January 1, 2023. Major factors influencing the utility rates right now is, once again, I mentioned the capital facilities plan. For the previous capital facilities plan, it was developed during the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, where revenues were very uncertain, where a lot of things were uncertain. So many projects were deferred. We didn't delete projects, we just pushed them out farther in the forecast. And just, once again, because we weren't sure about the amount of revenue and how much work we could do. The current 2023-2029 capital facilities plan is full implementation of the CFP to make sure that we can do the projects to keep our utilities strong. A brief comment on the COVID-19 pandemic. We saw some pretty significant changes in usage during the peak of the pandemic, with more residential use and relatively less commercial use. The total revenue wasn't that off. We've seen a return to near pre-pandemic times with respect to revenue and usage. We're still seeing a little bit higher, and we expect to see higher residential use with the increase in the telecommuting. Inflation, it's a major factor with respect to the budgets. This is both the increased cost to do projects, staffing, and the rest, and that goes throughout the budgets, and the 9.5% CPI is a major factor. And then wastewater treatment and water purchase. Wastewater treatment rates you'll see are increasing significantly when these are the rates we have to pay to King County. We purchase our water from Seattle Pacific Utilities, and it's a 0% increase this year, and we put a placeholder in the future for future rate increases. And Tagi to discuss a bit about rate making.
Yeah, so generally when we're putting together a rate forecast, we want to make sure that rates recover the cost of providing service. And that's what we're looking at here on this slide. You know, 2 types of costs that we incorporate are operating and maintenance costs. This include people, salaries and benefits, supplies and materials, inspecting and maintaining what you already have. And notably for the water utility, there's purchased water from Seattle. Notably for the sewer utility, there's wastewater treatment services provided by King County, and those are significant expenditure line items that need to be forecast over time and make sure that rates can cover those in addition to those other items we mentioned. The other big one is capital costs, and while your operating costs typically are more steady year to year based on an adopted budget, you can apply cost escalation and have a pretty good idea of what those are. The capital projects and the expenditures related to those can really vary year to year depending on how many projects you're taking on, how big those projects are, and so it's a little bit harder to forecast those. Do you save up in advance? Do you borrow? Can we get grants for those projects? So that one's a little bit more tricky to forecast, but overall, those 2 elements are the key items that go into the rate forecast. So it's really a balance of what revenue or resources do you have and what are you spending that on. And as Boyd mentioned, we look at both the near term, the biennium budget, but also we look at a longer time period to line up with the capital facilities plan over 7 years. So while you might set rates 1 year at a time, at least that's historically been the practice over the past few years for the city, we like to look at 6-7 years at a time to see, are there larger projects on the horizon, are there trends that we can pick up that are beyond that 2-year budget cycle that might inform this year's rates to help particular fund, say, stay in the positive over a 6 or 7 year time period. And an example that might help illustrate this is, if you own a home, there's a lot of maintenance type activities that some are easier and less expensive. You might have a leaky faucet, change light bulbs, occasional painting. Some are more major and further apart, furnace replacement, replacing the roof. And the key thing there with those bigger ticket items are you want to avoid surprises, emergency projects. It can be a lot more costly to, say, replace a furnace on the weekend when you have to call somebody to, pay overtime, those sorts of things. So utilities are no different. There are some easier, less expensive items that you can do to kind of keep things working well, but there are some bigger projects that you need to plan for in advance so that you can proactively repair and replace those items versus reactively respond to emergencies, which can be problematic in terms of public safety, more costly to ratepayers, et cetera. So that's kind of the balance of the short and long-term aspect of utility rate planning.
Thank you. Before you'll see a slide that is very detailed. Typically, we don't share these slides, but I really want to try to explain the components of how we look at fund balances. When we get to each utility, there'll be a simple pie chart, not because it needs to be simple, but when I look at these numbers, I can see how these would just be a lot of numbers. So I'd like to look at, this is the water fund. One thing I'd like to mention is this fund balance sheet here has many, many rows and many columns that are hidden. It's a dynamic document. You can see in that second column it says year-to-date 8/31. So we're constantly updating our revenue, our expenses, how much projects are costing, and we also look at, let's say, the fifth column, 2022 estimated year end. So we're always estimating where we're going to be at the end. So we have a good baseline for the future. So the major components of this, I'm going to go to the orange circled, it's below the red, it looks kind of orange to me, is the beginning fund balance. And that's actually what you have in the bank from the previous year. So you'll see it looks like a pretty big number. Let's say for 2023, it's $4.4 million. But of that beginning fund balance, we have restricted items, and those are circled in red. That's for debt service, pay our loans, it's for the pension contribution. Capital emergency reserve, we have to set aside, and this is all per the municipal code and our financial policies, we have to set aside 2% of the total value of our system every year in case a major component fails. So we have the funds available to do that. Capital emergency reserve. Operating reserve, for the water and sewer, we have to set aside 60 days where if we don't have revenue, we have funds to continue operating as a utility. It's 120 days for the storm. And then the capital reserve. That's a reserve that if one of the capital projects has increased costs, we can pay that. So these are all restricted funds we can't touch. They're just there for an emergency. And then we look at the unrestricted balance in green, and that's really what we can work with. All the rest are just kind of fixed there. And you can see in 2023 we have a pretty good-looking unrestricted beginning fund balance of $2.5 million. We forecast this out, and you'll start seeing some red numbers. The red numbers aren't allowed. They're definitely not allowed in the biennium. It's fine to see them in the future because we can address those issues, and we can address them by looking for grants or loans or other sources of revenue, other cost-saving activities, but also by rate increases. So when you see these numbers, remember, one, they're fluid, and two, they're planning level numbers for the 2025 and beyond. A couple other, you'll see I circled something in purple on the bottom right, and that's something that people should see and say, holy smokes, $4 million of negative on the ending fund balance. What we do in Public Works is we try to position ourselves for success, and that means we're doing project design and permitting early, so we're eligible for grants, and then we show the construction costs on our CFP. We can't afford that construction in the future, but by having that project on the plan, we're eligible to go for grants. So what you'll typically see, and Steve Morikawa is much more eloquent than I am on this, is we get ourselves situated, we understand the costs, we get the design going, we get the permit going, and we score very well on grants. So you'll see this in each of the utilities is we're positioning ourselves for that. A couple other particulars on this, you'll see up near the top, we have Seattle Public Utility rates. Like I said, for 2023 it's 0. We don't know what 2024 is, so we conservatively estimate 2%. City CPI, we show the 9.5 and the 3 from finance, and then we've we've assumed some numbers there. Someone may say they're low, someone may say they're high, but they're just placeholders. And once again, these are outside of the 2-year biennium. And then you'll see the city rate increase. We do our best to keep rate increases low. The utilities work diligently to give good service, meet regulations, and keep rates low. But you'll see on this, you'll see some numbers, 5-6%. This is directly out of our water system plan. When we had our water system plan consultant look at our long-range forecast for the water utility, it's like, hey, you folks are, to get these projects done, you're expending more than you have for revenue. There are things we can do. Once again, this is a council decision every year. These numbers are looked at every year. Things can move around. So I just kind of wanted to give you an overview on that. And with that said, I'd like to get to the first utility. And once again, you'll see pie charts for each of these. So our water utility, we're to provide clean water at the sufficient pressure and flow to satisfy requirements. And these are both level of service requirements from the folks we serve, and also regulatory requirements. It could be fire flow, other things like that. The City of Bothell water utility serves generally the south half of the city. The north half of the city is generally served by Alderwood. And it's day-to-day operation of, I put some stats down there, about 80 miles of water main, over 1,000 hydrants. So it's all these things that are happening every day. Some of the major drivers for rate considerations for the water utility are, it's not water purchase increase because it's 0. The consumer price index increase of 9.5% is high, and that impacts our construction costs, it impacts our staffing costs, it impacts a lot of things. And the key for us is our decreasing fund balance. If we look at this as home finances, we don't want to go negative. We don't want to lose our home. That's not the case with the utility, but we don't want to see those numbers. So right now, we're recommending a rate increase of 6%. It's less than 9.5%, which is good, but it's still a relatively high number, in my opinion. So here are these pie charts. Once again, there's a lot of information here, but I'd just like to walk you through it because I think this really tells a story. If you go to your left-hand pie chart, you'll see the fund balance, and you'll see the restricted funds, the capital reserve, operating reserve, debt service, and then you'll see that unrestricted. This is a 7-year average. Each of these plots is a 7-year average. That's a really low number, and it's low because we go negative. And that's something we need to look at. Revenue. The majority of our revenue is from user fees, and then we have a good amount from facility charges. So when you see that 411 for facility charges, we're much higher than that in 2022 because of the amazing amount of development activity we have now, but we really want to forecast that out conservatively. And then grants and loans. And expenditures, you can see the majority of our expenditures are the green pie, the capital projects, and then it's water purchase. Salary and benefits, that's self-explanatory. Supplies and services, that's all the things we need to get done to actually run the utility that aren't staffing. And then there's also a major component of the interfund transfers. So you'll see interfund services and utility and excise tax. The utility tax and the interfund services on the order of $1.8 million. So that's revenue that's being used to offset, being used to pay for services and pay their fair share within the general fund. This is a real broad comparison to our neighbors, and we'll have a better one in a second, but these are the 25 SPU purveyors, and I'm really sorry there's small numbers. You'll get a better comparison on the next slide. When we looked at this in 2018, Bothell was 5th or 6th lowest rate for all 25 purveyors. That's a really good thing we have low rates, but it also indicates maybe something else. Were we collecting enough revenue to do our work? And the answer is, based on our long-term forecast at the time, the answer was no, we were going in the red. So we've steadily seen rate increases over time. We're now up to the lower middle, which is good. We're very competitive with our neighbors, and we're getting things done. I wanted to just show a few things that we do. What you see in that the photo in the upper right, that's what a modern water main looks like. You'll notice that it's ductile iron. It's mortar lined. It's going to last 50 years, more like 100 plus. And then you'll see the fittings. They're all bolted. They're all restrained for seismic resiliency. They're all coated. They're good things. I really wanted to show you a piece of asbestos cement water pipe. Unfortunately, if you see that pipe, you just react, and I couldn't find a good photo unless it was a stock photo. So this is actually an old wood stave pipe that someone unearthed in the city of Bothell prior to our utilities. I just thought it was kind of cool. We don't use that anymore. And then here's our comparison to our neighbors. And what we did is there's lots of comparisons by lots of folks. FCSG does these comparisons. You'll see that with the stormwater, but we really wanted to make it apples to apples. So we used an average of a 1,200 cubic feet, 12 CCFs, which is 12,000 cubic feet, and there's 748 gallons per cubic foot. And we use the adopted rates for each utility to give a real good comparison. These are winter rates. And you'll see we're in there. We're definitely not the highest. We're kind of right in the middle lower, which is good. So we're providing good service at a good rate. The city council just approved meter replacement. This is really important. These are the type of things you'll see when meters start to fail, they read less. There's actually requirements to replace these, but one, you also want to make sure that you're billing for the water used. So this is a Badger meter. You'll see a brass casing. Inside the casing, there's a rotating disc, and when that disc rotates, it's a certain volume of water, so it's a very simple device. And that's it for water. I'd like to just kind of march through these if that's okay. Okay, cool. The sewer utility, safe, reliable sewer, Department of Health regulations, and conveyance to King County wastewater treatment. We have about 70 miles of main, 4 lift stations. We recently completed updates to the Camden lift station number 4. We're looking at updating lift station 1 with a bypass within the next year. The major increase is treatment cost. So King County sewer treatment is 5.57%. The rate increases you're going to see through King County are significant. They're 5.75% through 2028, and then they jump to 8.75% through the rest of the 2020s to 2030. And that's an aggregate increase by 2030 of 85%. So you're going to see most every jurisdiction respond to this, and you'll see 6% increases from jurisdictions to be able to pay for that treatment cost. That's a hard cost we have to pay. And then the consumer price index. The sewer utility serves the south half of the city just like water. You'll see that the recommended rate increase is 2.5%, and we're recommending that because the sewer utility has had fewer projects and fewer major issues. We've actually built up a significant beginning fund balance, so staff's recommending not passing on the full cost to offset the treatment and the CPI, because at this point we don't need to. When we factor in all those increases, they get up to 85%. We're doing pretty well as long as we march along with smaller increases over time. And that's mostly to smooth out rates. We typically don't want to see 0 and then 10, then 0, 10, 0, 10. We really look at this in the long range because that's a burden on everyone. So for the utility overview with respect to the fund balance, you'll see that very healthy 7-year average, $5.5 million unrestricted beginning fund balance. We're very pleased for that because that 85% increase in wastewater treatment rates with King County, that's to prepare for the planning for some upcoming regulations. That doesn't include the costs to implement those regulations. So we're fully anticipating in the 2030s to see some very significant increases in wastewater treatment. They'll either have to do some serious retrofits or potentially construct a new treatment plant. And then you'll see those same restricted funds. Rate revenue is the major component of our revenue with facility charges and grants and loans. And then the expenses. You'll see treatment is a huge amount. We pay a lot of our revenue to treatment, and that's just a fixed cost. Capital projects, like I said, are slightly less than the water utility. And then we have those same other components with supplies and services, salary benefits, and the interfund transfers and utility excise tax to the general fund. This is a comparison. We have relatively high rates. Well, let me take that back. Our rate is consistent with our neighbors. It's within plus or minus $10, but when you plot it up, we're on the higher end. But still, we're very consistent with our neighbors. Once again, we've had questions about what are these funds used for? So I'm sorry, I included a picture of a pipe because someone said something in the last meeting. But the top pipe is a 5-year-old PVC main. It'll last for a good 50 years and it'll look like that for the entire time. The middle image is concrete pipe, and that's present within a portion of the city, and that's what's in the Valhalla neighborhood that we're addressing. When you look at this, it's not the offset or even the roots that bother me. Those roots have to be cut out. It's the fact that it's not connected. And what that means is groundwater gets into these pipes, that gets conveyed to King County, they have to treat more. And there is a trend we're already hearing kind of the forefront of that is I&I will be something that is going to be looked at very closely by King County, because if they can reduce I&I, they can reduce the potential impacts to, or extra effluent and flow through their treatment plants. So we're looking at these hard. And then the bottom image, it's not the same pipe. Obviously, there's no offset, but that's 3-foot concrete pipe, ungasketed segments that have been lined with cure-in-place pipe. So the bottom pipe works just as well as the top pipe. It's an old, 30, 40-year-old pipe, and it's been retrofitted at a cost that's about a quarter of what open-cut trenching would be. Storm and surface water utility. This is the entire city limits. This pays for all the comprehensive planning, the operation, our compliance with the National Pollution Discharge and Elimination System requirements, which are constantly getting more strict, and then lots of pipes and catch basins. And the catch basin number here is interesting. It's 8,500 catch basins. We have to inspect and or clean 95% of those annually. It's actually a rotating circuit, so it's half every year to comply with our permit. So it's a significant amount of work. Consumer price index is the major driver, along with a decreasing fund balance in 2026, and we're recommending a 6% increase. And then once again, these diagrams, you'll see the unrestricted beginning fund balance is a much smaller proportion of the fund balance. And that's once again because we're seeing those lower numbers in our savings account. User fees account for the majority. And then you'll see that we do have some significant capital projects. And these are everything from pipe replacement and improvements of stormwater facilities. One of the new drivers is fish culvert. Department of Ecology and others, they've mapped where fish barriers are. And so we're actively looking where we can address those issues, and you were presented some of that information within the capital facilities plan. Selling and benefits, we have a pretty good amount of staff. Bothell is one of the leaders, in my opinion, in stormwater management with respect to the NPDS permit. And then you'll see the same interfund services and utility excise tax. This is actually a comparison from FCSG.
Yes, we looked at quite a few different cities in the region and mapped out their stormwater rates. You can see Bothell on the lower to middle end there, about $17 per month this year. With that 6% rate increase that Boyd mentioned, that'd be up to $17.70 per month next year. Although, unlike water and sewer, which are billed by the city, stormwater is billed on the annual property tax statements by King and Snohomish County. So customers will see this charge in a different place than their water and sewer charges. But even just a few years ago, it seemed like the average monthly rate was about $15 per month, and you can see quite a few cities up in the $20, $25 range, and even there on the far right, Sammamish, they're about $33 per month right now for their monthly stormwater rate.
Thank you. And then images on the right, once again, some innovation. The city purchased a device, I believe this year, for staff to actually install cure-in-place patches. So this is actually the same pipe. It's not the exact same segment, but you can see the offset further down. And you'll see an offset and leakage, and what that means is typically roots will invade. So this has been cleaned, the roots cut, and then they have a device that'll insert a cure-in-place patch from the inside, which is great because it's not ripping up the streets, it's much more cost-effective, and city staff can do it themselves. Okay, so those are the rates. For the municipal code updates, we have some minor housekeeping issues. We try to look at Title 18 whenever we look at rates, and we've had a few brought forward for consideration. One is leak adjustment for water billing. If someone has a catastrophic failure in their plumbing, we're talking pipes freeze and the crawl space floods, or pipes in the ceiling fail, or this or that fails, and they lose a large amount of water. If they're able to show the dates this happened and that they paid a plumber to come in with receipts and fix it as quickly as they could, the city reimburses some of those funds. What we've seen is that same approach has been used for irrigation. Typically, irrigation leaks are maintenance issues. Someone runs over a irrigation head with a mower. Irrigation is not health, life, safety. We need it for service. And if people pay attention to irrigation, they should be able to manage their usage and any impacts if they're maintaining correctly. And the biggest one is it's really hard to quantify leaks for irrigation because the water's going to the same spot. It's still doing the irrigation work. So we're recommending that the irrigation leak adjustment be removed. The other one is repeat incidents. The goal of this program is to provide a safety net, basically. If someone has a major impact to their home and they're already paying for the restoration there's an adjustment for the water loss. With that said, the expectation is you're going to take care of the issue, you're going to address other issues, and this shouldn't happen again. So we're recommending that it's restricted to one occurrence every 3 years, just so that we can really make sure that that program can, and once again, this is offset by other revenue within the utilities. We want to make sure it's more equitable. And then the winter averaging time period for sewer billing, your sewer bills within the city's utility area are based on your water usage during the winter time period. And the reason they're based on water usage during the winter time period is it takes away the summer uses, like filling a pool for your children in the yard or sprinkling the lawn. So it's really looking about what goes down the drain. And we base that on the winter average. Currently, that winter average time period is November through June. We're seeing a lot more outdoor use and with respect to with our summers in the May, June time period, because that's when people are starting to garden. So we've been asked and we've looked at, should we reduce that instead of that 8-month period, November to June, 4 billing cycles, go from November to April, 3 billing cycles, 6 months. And it actually is more equitable. It really is based on your sewer usage, and it has a very minimal impact to sewer revenue. So we're recommending going to the more representative, shorter winter average time period. The next one is consistency in billing units. Our code always evolves. We have different definitions. We write out 100 cubic feet, and sometimes we use CCF, the abbreviation for cubic feet. And so we'd like to make that all consistent using CCF. And that's how we bill, that's how it's on our website. We just want to clean up the code. The other one is we look at base rates. So for your sewer on your 2-month biannual billing, it currently says the first 2 CCF in each month is covered with your base rate. Well, we don't charge per month. And so we're saying instead of the first two CCFs per month, it's 4 CCFs per the 2-month biennial or the bi-monthly period. So it doesn't make an impact on rates or usage. It's clean and it's more consistent with our utility billing system and how we bill. The last one is, I just wanted to let you know, is the code is always being looked at. So we're looking at future updates in 2023, recommending a full rate study. We've been having this on the back burner. It's been funded for the last 4 years, but with COVID-19, it's something that, since we're more stable now, and FCSG does do work with full rate studies. And Tagi, any comments on that?
Yeah, just as one example, a lot of the items that we've been talking about here tonight and Boyd's been discussing for the different utilities is how much revenue do we need coming in the door to cover our operating and capital expenditures. And we typically think about that as, how big does the pie need to be to make sure your utilities are functioning in a fiscally sustainable way. One of the items we might look at in a full rate study is, are your customer classes, paying their fair share? So if how much revenue is coming in the door is how big does that pie need to be? A more in-depth rate study might look at how do we slice that up, and is single family being subsidized by multifamily or vice versa? And given the significant amount of growth in the city over the past 5-10 years, it could be a good time to look at your current rates, make sure that your customer classes are paying rates and revenues in a way that is consistent with the service being provided. So that's one example that, not in what we talked about here tonight, but we might look at in a more full rate study down the road.
And to add to that, staff is already looking at equity with respect to missing middle housing. We're working with the Community Development Department and how rates apply to that, ADUs and the rest. So we're starting to set the stage to understand how this works. And the only way to actually implement, let's say you have a separate billing class for ADUs or missing middle, because currently we're set up, it's a 3/4 inch meter. You're going to pay the same rates as the 3/4 inch meter for an ADU as you would for the full-size house. That's how it's set up. They'll use less consumption, but the base rate's the same. So we're already having those internal discussions, and when we look at the full rate study, can we break out those customer classes a bit more carefully so we truly understand the impact from an ADU or missing middle housing, which may most likely be less than a full single-family residential unit. And it's very interesting. King County Wastewater Treatment Division's already done this work. It was actually FCSG that did the work for them, but they've already broken out on their facility charges. It's not you're a single-family home, you're going to pay one facility charge. You're a single-family home that's this size, you're going to pay 1.19. you're an average, it's 1.0. You're a small single-family residential or multifamily, you're 0.79, and you're an ADU, and you're 0.59. So a lot of the heavy lifting's been completed, but before any of those type of rates are looked at more closely or implemented, it's typically good to look at the utilities as a whole, because if you take away revenue at one point, you have to make sure you address it in the other. And I think that's it. This is pretty much the summary. We have 2 slides that show comparisons from the current rates and the future rates. Once again, our goal is to provide good utility service, safe water, good treatment for wastewater, and adequate treatment, adequate management of stormwater. This is a hard discussion. No one likes to see rates increase, but we presented the information as best as we could to demonstrate that we think these are the rate increases that would help continue to fund the utility as currently required with respect to projects and level of service. What else can I say? You'll see the comparison here. We've updated these. The previous, when you saw these last year's, I think our usage was 11 CCF for average 2-month period in the winter. It's now 12. I don't know if that's anything to do with COVID or stay at home, but that's what we used. And you'll see the increases. So the 6% on the water, 2.5 sewer, 6% storm, and it's an average of $65 a year increase. And we've been asked in the past to make sure not to forget multifamily and commercial. It's very hard to compare those because a multifamily unit could have a duplex with 2, and that's what we've shown. It could have 4 units and different meter sizes than the rest. But yeah, it's the same 6%, but in this case, total per year is $39 for a duplex, and that's, it's one bill split in 2. And then for a major entertainment complex with much more usage, you'll see these are big numbers. It is an increase. It's $2,000 a year, but you look at what it is. They're paying $45,000 a year, so it's the same percent increases. And I believe that's what we have to present to you as a basis for information for the public hearing.
Councilmember Zorns?
Okay, so I'm apologizing now. I have all my questions scribbled around on one page. My intention is to not give you whiplash, but I may. Working backwards, customer class is an interesting concept to me, and I'm grateful that you're talking about looking at that. I hope that it's based on consumption, because very few entities are in a position in today's economy subsidizing others. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for looking at fish barrier passages. And then I have a question about Brightwater. Are they like reaching their max? You mentioned that we'd be looking at another sewage treatment plant. There's discussion about that.
Yeah, the most of the treatment's occurring at West Point. So it's I'll try to answer this succinctly, and I apologize, it's a lot of information, a lot of talking.
Yeah.
But yeah, Brightwater does treatment, and it produces.
But doesn't most of Bothell go to Brightwater, or are we going?
We're going that way.
Seriously?
Well, there's some that goes that way as well. So I just remember you see the portal down here and the rest, you see the treatment plant up there, but also we have effluent going that way. So the trunk line just kind of cruises through, and we have multiple connections. But the whole thing with respect to, I think the question was about Brightwater or 4th Street.
Right, because I was under the assumption most of our sewage went to Brightwater before it headed out towards Puget Sound, but you're saying some of Bothell does not go through
I can
Brightwater?
follow up with this, but yeah, if you look at a basin map, a lot of ours goes that way.
Goes to the one that's having problems.
Brightwater's upstream. And it's not really having problems, it's just at capacity, and with respect to, you've seen discussions of nutrient loading in Puget Sound with respect to the environment of Puget Sound.
That's a big one.
There are some, I mean, they're in there now.
Right.
Regulations to address that, and part of that is to address combined sewer overflow and treatment and discharge. And so that's what they're looking at. King County's looking at, do we need another treatment plant, improve treatment plants, or do we need to kind of reduce flow from upstream? And that's why you'll hear us talk about infiltration and inflow, I&I, a lot, because if we can reduce that, we're reducing our
So we could be looking at a sewage treatment probably closer to this end of Lake Washington,
more
possibly.
likely than not, it'd be somewhere, down there on Puget Sound. So it
Okay.
could be South Seattle. I don't know the answers.
Okay.
It's all kind of guesswork now. And that's the interesting part about the rates we discussed with a cumulative 85%. That's just to kind of understand the problem and plan for that.
Okay.
It's not implementing any solutions.
Okay. I have to tell you, skeptics kept going through my mind, thinking about, man, I bet there's a lot of skeptic people in Bothell that wouldn't be too motivated to go on sewer looking at the price increase, but
Would you say they're skeptical of septic?
no, skeptical of
Skeptical to go off septic.
That's
I'm
it.
trying to get a sentence with the two
There
of
you
them in
go,
there.
but I couldn't come up with a great pun on that. Back to my questions. How does Redmond keep their water rates so low and still function?
So Redmond does have wells. They have their own sources. So that's part of the equation. I don't know the rest of the equation. They have a much larger commercial base than the city of
So
Bothell.
they have some access to aquifers or, oh, those lucky
Yeah,
dogs.
I'm guessing it's part of the economies of scale. They have a much broader base.
Okay.
And I'm sure that they charge some of the commercial businesses there.
Okay.
I'm sure they get quite a bit of revenue.
Okay. Alderwood water rates, are they going up comparatively to Seattle's water rates?
So we don't have the answer for that yet.
Okay.
We're pretty, and I should have mentioned this earlier, we're kind of ahead of the game. It's kind of hard to find comparables for what's happening in 2023. I don't think you folks had seen anything either. Tage, have you?
You know, most cities will be looking at rates, if at all, in October, November range. So a lot of those comparisons that we looked at for those bar graphs, those are 2022 rates for those cities and districts. So many of them will be going through the same process, looking at their finances and might be increasing rates themselves, January 1st, 23.
Okay, well, I will tell you at this point, I saw the 6% increase on water and I thought, didn't we just have a hefty water increase and say we're doing it, a hefty increase here so that we can soften it down the road? And I understand the impact of today's economy and the need to keep the system running. But I got to tell you, I'm really looking forward to some interties that are working, and maybe we could do some competitive water purchases so that we're not always at Seattle's mercy for buying their product at their price. So I'm very, I've been interested in Alderwood water for a long time, this more so. And then I appreciate the winter averaging times, narrowing that. Would it be possible to go to like March 31st? Because I'm just thinking about how we use water at our house and we start power washing things and we don't, we're doing it as spring is starting to, and that's not part of our normal wintertime usage. And I know that's not just us. So would it be possible to even move it a month more in?
Currently, no, because our utility billing system is set for 2 months. So
Well, then let's go to February 28th.
Yeah, well, that's challenging too, because that's a very short period.
Okay.
But it's a really good question. It's something could be looked at in the future.
Okay.
But I just think that would be very challenging to do.
Okay, but not impossible. He
Nothing's
looks over
impossible.
his shoulder.
Yeah, I'm just saying, nothing's impossible, but I wouldn't think that would be something that would be very effective
Okay.
with the amount of effort to change our.
Okay, I'm gonna have to tell my husband to put off the power washing until May 1st. Okay. And then on irrigation, you were talking about not allowing them when they have a whoopsie. And I don't know, because, I'm just thinking about my own gardening and inadvertently leaving water on. It's not water that I necessarily want to be watering. And so would it be possible for someone who has a whoopsie with their irrigation to allow them a one whoopsie and then say you're responsible for the water that you've unleashed on your.
Yes, if I can respond to that real quick.
Yeah.
Once again, this is a public hearing, and so this is more of the information exchange, and then
Yeah.
you'll take testimony from other folks that may have signed up, and then
Yeah.
you guys will close it or go. These type of questions we could address and come back with.
That's
What I'll say-
perfect.
What I'll say though on irrigation, it's really challenging because even now you have to show that there's been a major impact. You have to document when the loss occurred, and you have to show a receipt of who fixed it. So it's
And
not for,
and that doesn't usually happen.
no, it's not for whoopsie, and it really is. We see irrigation, I mean, it's a very good thing, but it's not, we need the water on our home for health, life, safety. It's more of something, hey, if you're going to use this, you should manage it. And if you choose not to manage it well, then you may be using more water that's going to get in your soil, and it's not where you want it, but please manage it well.
Okay.
Because otherwise, all the ratepayers are paying for that loss.
It's tough love. Got it. Okay. That is it. So thank you very much.
Councilmember Alders.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for the presentation tonight, for the information. Definitely appreciate the pictures. We're fans of those around here. And so when it comes to, I think, the idea of potentially reducing rate increases over time and making improvements to the system, you mentioned that grants were possible for the water utility, and that might kind of offset some of those fund balances that are going into the negative. But are there also grant opportunities for the storm utilities and for some of the fish culverts? And are those being pursued by the city as well?
Most definitely. There are actually some very good opportunities coming forward with respect to federal allocations for fish culverts. Typically, I focus on the water because it's been the one that's been most challenged with respect to revenue and expense. But yeah, we're always looking for opportunities because you think a 1% increase on $7 million, that's $70,000 a year. That's not much. I mean, it's always hard to increase rates, but you imagine what it's paying for. That's not a big chunk of $1 million project. So we're always looking for grants. We're always looking for opportunities for those. And fish culverts are really important for the stormwater utility. Otherwise, we won't be able to construct those improvements. They're just too expensive.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Councilmember Dodd.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. The photos are exciting too. Love to hear about how the system works because it's something that I had no idea about in my other capacities. So I did have a question kind of dovetailing off of what Councilmember Zorn said for the forgiveness for leaks. I would love to see some data around how often that comes up, like what burden that is on your budget, right? And what you would see alleviated if we didn't forget, if we had the one instance per 3 years and removed it for irrigation, just to kind of see the financial impacts just in numbers to help understand. Thank you.
Most assuredly, and I know this is a procedural thing, so maybe I'll be corrected by someone, but once again, this is exchange information. Once the public hearing is closed, if council wants to give direction on some things, and Paul or Mayor will, or someone who's going to correct me, or city manager, these things don't have to move forward. If there's questions about leaks and how much that costs, we can get the information and bring it back. But if it's something that the council chooses to say, we want to look at this next year, that's a fine option as well. So I just wanted to give you those tools because we want to make sure that we address this before the end of the year, and some of these things, if we can't address in a timely fashion, you may want to consider taking out, which is fine.
Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. As we, rate increases are always something that can affect our communities, and we're seeing it right now. We're in some times that are unprecedented, and thank you for always looking and being fiscally responsible. But what I would like to, hopefully we can see in the future is these rates among other rates of what people are going to be looking at or facing, right? So we're talking about utility rates, but there's also, garbage rates, there's also property taxes, there's all these other things that are going to be coming as well. And so what appears to be a small increase at 6%, a dollar here, $2 there, $10 here, $10 there can add up to hundreds of dollars, which in some cases can really affect people. And I know we're doing our best here, but I just would like to hopefully we can see that information together. You talked a little bit about the infrastructure and contingencies, potential contingencies, or having money available for projects that go over, cost overruns, things like that. In the analysis, the information that you put together, does that take into account what we're going to see as far as cost increases and construction costs in the near future?
That's a really good question. So the restricted funds that are there to cover unanticipated increases, it's just a number, it's just a percent. We do our best with the capital facilities plan to kind of, when we show a project in the future, there is some escalation, but I don't think anyone would anticipate the 9.5% or what had happened next year. So it's something we always look at, and that's what's great about the capital facilities plan process here at the city of Bothell. This isn't a plan that's looked at every 6 years or 7 years. It's something that we look at every 2 years. So each time that happens, we're updating those costs. So we address it that way. One is escalation at the time the facilities plan's adopted, and then as information changes, we update those costs, let's say, every 2 years, and at project level as well.
That's perfect. That's what I was looking for. And that goes along the lines of, something that's on the plan may not get done, may not get funded because there's cost overruns on other projects that ensure that we can't do those. So making sure that we're looking at those projects that are critically important, maintenance type projects, things that are going to cost us more later are going to be important to look at. Numbers of 8,548 catch basins, 70 miles of sewer main. We talk about additional housing in our community. Does that mean additional infrastructure in our community? And how are we paying for that additional infrastructure, right? Ensuring when we talk about adding all these additional housing units, we want to make sure that we're looking at what that impact is going to be on the current existing community.
Yeah, that's another really good question. And the reason I say that is when you look at the CFP, typically when you see these city projects, the increase in M&O is zero. And that's because when you upgrade these facilities, typically things are much easier to maintain. The catch basins, the pipe, all that stuff. When people have concerns about development, I see that as an opportunity. As development comes in, they're replacing all the utilities on the frontage if they're substandard. Anything they install is to current standards. And whether that's if you're worried about flow control or water quality for stormwater, or restrained joints and seismic resiliency on a water pipe, all that stuff's brought up to date. So when these things come in, yeah, there is an additional cost to maintain these, but typically the improvements they make and the materials they use, it's I'm not going to say it's zero, but it's a pretty small change because they're taking care of so many issues, and we're really pushing that. You'll see the Ross Road Apartments. You've seen some closures on 185th. That's because as a condition of their work, they have to replace AC water main. Well, that's a really good thing. They're having to fix storm lines, and they're having to extend sewer. They're having to rebuild asphalt to current standards. So I actually see redevelopment and development as an opportunity to improve what we have out there, which typically takes less effort to maintain.
So that, to me, seems like we're putting that development is paying for development, the impacts of development, correct? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, sir. That's the direction we have.
That's a good thing. And lastly, I think if I heard you correctly, there was a statement about looking at ADUs differently from single-family homes, differently from apartments or multifamily units, things like that. So just for clarification purposes for me, if I am a single person and I use X amount of water, and another person uses X amount of water, we're paying the same? Or is that a no? You're going to pay based on what you live in?
This is another good one, and I'm going to explain it is, unless you can look at the ordinance, but for a 3/4 inch meter or standard residential meter, it's a base charge plus a usage charge. Let's say, I should know these numbers off the top of my head, but my brain's not working very well. Let's say it's $60 a bi-monthly period for your base charge. You don't use any water, you're paying $60. If you use water, you're paying $5 a CCF. Those are round numbers. So you, as a single person, and decides not to use any water, it's going to pay $60. Your neighbor is going to pay $60 plus their usage. They could use 12 CCFs, which would be another $60, 120. So that's very equitable. The only issue is you as a single person in a 3,000 square foot house with a big lawn that could use all that water or need fire suppression, that could have those demands because our water systems are designed for demands. Do you have more potential for demand than a little tiny ADU? And the answer could be yes. So instead of doing that $60 base plus consumption, maybe it's $30 base plus consumption because the overall burden of that ADU is smaller. And these are the discussions we're having with our neighboring districts. We've had started these discussions with the Department of Commerce. Because these are things, this is where the rubber hits the road. You folks, you can decide that every lot in the city can have 12 ADUs and a lot of missing middle, which is fine, that's good. But when the permits come in, it's like, okay, how are we going to serve water to these folks? And if they have a burden, how do we pay their fair share? It's not going to be one single family rate, in my opinion, for an ADU. It's going to be a proportion of that. So when you start looking at it, that's the type of evaluation. So we're starting that framework in those discussions, and then those things would be looked at, with management discussions and a consultant. So I think it's pretty exciting.
That's awesome. You're spot on. You hit it spot on. We want to have an open discussion about it. I think, when we talk about, one single-family home, tearing it down and building 2 homes on that same lot, an infill lot, basically is what we're doing, there could potentially be actually more usage on those 2 individual homes. So I'm very thankful that you guys are at least looking at that. So thank you
Yeah,
very much.
discussion just started.
Yeah, thanks.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Boyd and Tagi. Great. I'm a big fan. Ever since the CFP conversation we had a few weeks ago, I'm a big fan of those pipes. So I love it. A couple of themes that were talked about, mentioned here. The first thing that came to mind is top of mind, in addition to the equity on the conversation we're going to have about home sizes and all that, the demand projections, but there's also the financial ability of the people living on those properties as well. Because we did raise, this year we raised by 6%, as was mentioned, and then we're raising another 6%. So that's compounded rate increases. As Councilmember McNeil mentioned, it might be a $5 charge here, but then over time and with the other expenses, it will add up, especially to those who are more lower income and more fixed income folks. That will affect them the most. So I hope that we can take that into consideration. There is, if you go to the financial, the table that you had, with all the expenses and revenue, I think there were some places where, and again, my math is, the quick eyeballing math is not good. I had to use the calculator, but there were a couple of places where there were supposed to be reds, but there weren't reds on the bottom line. So I don't know how the projections, there might be some missing information as you were taking that screenshot to make things smaller to fit on a screen. So I would recommend you take a look. Maybe next time we talk about this, we can take a more deeper look at this and how you derive the 6% out of that, because probably analysis happened on that spreadsheet. Yeah, I had a note here about CPI because the primary driver was CPI. From my understanding from your presentation, but CPI affects everybody, but it's related to this equity conversation around not only type of housing, but also the households living within those different types of housing. Did we raise the rates for sewer and stormwater this year also, like we did with the water utilities?
Yeah, January 1, 2022 was 6% across the board.
Across the board was 6%. So we're compounding increases of rates, which adds to the amplification of those rate increases, right? So not questions, it's just comments on the presentation as we were going through this.
Sure. May I respond about the fund balance sheet, please?
About what?
The fund balance sheet?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
So that is a very large spreadsheet.
I'm sure.
Many, many rows. I don't think there's anything that's shown as black should be red. I'm just letting you know. And we can have a discussion with city manager and Director Lenhart to see if we can go into those in more detail. The kicker is this is something that finance looks at, we look at, and FCSG reviews. So it's a really good model. I just want to.
Oh, I'm not discounting it. Like I'm saying, when you shrink down that spreadsheet into a slide, some information will get lost. So I'm not
And I typically wouldn't share that in this setting, but I really
I
wanna,
love this stuff,
I just really
so I'm
wanted-
sure Councilmember Mankey here loves it too, so. So, yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Mankey?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you both for the presentation. It was very helpful. My only question is around communication of changes. How do we currently communicate to our ratepayers any kind of cost increases that are coming about? And I guess the question would extend as well to the stormwater, since that's billed differently than the water and sewer utilities. I'm just curious how we typically communicate those out.
For sure, I'll respond to how we do it here, then I'll ask Tage elsewhere, but this is how we communicate. We have a public hearing, we post it, and we notify folks. I'll say for the last 5 of these I've been involved with, we have had pretty minor comment. So I will say it may be that if people aren't paying, or if people aren't involved in that process, it may be that they find out about this on January, well, with their first bill. Tage, do you know of other districts or jurisdictions that do other?
Yeah, it's often a combination of several different avenues, with social media these days, Facebook and Nextdoor has been a common way to kind of communicate those out. Meetings just like this, bill stuffers that might go out for the regular water and sewer bills, you can, communicate, and I'm sure that that's the case, that ahead of time, those changes are communicated when the customers open their bill or look at their online invoice. Just a few ideas like that.
Okay. I don't know if we currently do bill stuffers or anything like that, but I would prefer to see us do a little bit more than just the public hearing. I know not everybody is paying attention to these things, and I think it's helpful when the rates go up. Immediately, I always wonder, like, what caused the rate increase, and there's always good reasons behind it. We don't raise rates just because we want more revenue. It's always because of capital projects or cost increases. So I would love to see us do something to make that information more available to the community, so that when they do have those questions, there's something for them to look at and then be able to ask questions if they have them.
Yeah, for sure. We can look into that for future if that's an appropriate response. Like we really try to keep a lot of this stuff on official communication channels, but there may be other options we haven't looked at, and so we'll definitely follow up with that.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Dodd?
Hi, it's me again. I'm over yonder in Alderwood. I've never actually had city water, but to talk about notification, just to advocate for people like me who kind of have their bill on an auto pay and they don't necessarily open the invoice every month. Maybe emails to our users too, like something that will get their attention, because I feel like there's definitely a chance if it's social media, Nextdoor, in the bill, you might miss some people who are just very busy at the moment and maybe don't read all their mail like they should. I'm not talking about anybody in particular, definitely not myself, but if we could just do that kind of reach out, just so we don't surprise people, I think that sounds awesome. But I also want to admit I am not a customer of the city utility, so if that's something you already do, sorry if I'm giving your idea back to you.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Just to piggyback, sorry, I had it here as a bullet point, and they just reminded me. Earlier this year, we had folks actually complain and raise a fuss. I don't know if you all remember, and because they legitimately they saw their rates increase, and nobody informed them. We may have put it through the official channels, but like in practicality, they didn't receive those notifications. So we probably should think about ways to inform, especially when we are raising rates as much as we are at this point.
Thank you.
Councilmember Zorns?
Real fast, maybe an easier way to do it is to give in the billing, there must be a place where you could include a note, next month, city council will be talking about it. Next month, council decided and your billing will reflect that, or next billing, et cetera. But just give people a countdown on when they can weigh in and when the decision has been made. And I would think at some point somebody's going to open their bill and see things are changing.
And that's typically what I've seen at other jurisdictions. There's a newsletter or something else like that. And that's actually, I know not everyone opens their mail, but that's a very equitable way to do that without, it's more of an official correspondence as opposed to social media. So I will definitely follow up with Director Lenhart and City Manager for future discussions on that.
Councilmember Alders.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to go back to the utility assistance conversation. And this might be more of a question for Interim Assistant City Manager Becky Range, because there has been, in part due to the work of the Human Services Committee, a desire to recognize that there are people on fixed incomes there, and there are low-income members of our community who, like, most of us may be able to weather these increases just fine, and like, yeah, okay, we don't love it, but we can adapt, and there are some who just have tighter margins. And so could you speak just a little bit about the city's utility assistance opportunities or other agencies that you know of who might be able to assist community members who have that need?
Yes, Councilmember, I can speak to some of that, and then if Public Works or anyone else needs to correct me, we do have a utility assistance fund process within the city, and it was currently administered by our ARPA administrator, and it was funded with ARPA funds. But in the last few months, you're well aware, we have a contract with the Center for Human Services. They are also providing utility assistance directly to residents in need with an ARPA grant-funded contract that they have with the city. But I do think these opportunities we could probably do a better job of making sure that the people who are really in need know that these resources are available and where to go to get them.
Yeah, and just to add to that, if I may, yeah, if you ever are really interested, you can go to our utility, just type in Bothell utility, and right on the front page there are quite a few resources. So some are private support. We have links to our senior and low income reduction program, which provides a 25% reduction, and we have some other links to King County. Some of them are a little older with respect to cleaning up after COVID, but there are quite a few opportunities there for seeking assistance. And I do know that our utility billing staff are very responsive on assisting with that.
I appreciate those answers. Thank you. I don't know if I've ever visited the utility webpage until just now. So thank you for that. And just the idea of, is there a newsletter that goes out? I know that I get one from Puget Sound Energy that compares me to my neighbors. But is there one that does go out for the utilities? And is it typical for this utility assistance information to be shared, in that format with users?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Director Lenhart, do you know?
So I believe when we had the ARPA program for utility assistance, we did do outreach to the community. If memory serves, we may have done postcards even at that point in time, but we certainly did. We do have a field on our bills where we can indicate if we do have opportunities. We rely on other city publications for newsletters, so like the Bothell Bridge, and we can work with the exec's office also on making sure that we get these notices and opportunities into the regular email newsletters that go out as well. So yeah, we do try to make ourselves available, and we have great customer service folks too in the utilities that whenever somebody is struggling or they have overdue bills or have had their water shut off, staff are very good at working with our customers to put them on a payment plan or whatever we can do to help them out.
Great, thank you.
All right, just a couple things from me. You mentioned that we're following these rate increases to be able to do the work that needs to be done in the system. Is that because there was a backlog of maintenance that wasn't done for a period of time?
I wouldn't say a backlog. There's always work to be done. I'd say when I made that comment, I should have been more clear, but mostly referring to capital projects. That's replacing outdated substandard infrastructure.
Okay.
Sunrise is a great example. That was AC main that just failed. And so we try to proactively address those. As Tagi mentioned, it's much cheaper to do these things and take care of business as we're doing a road project or something like that, as opposed to having a failure and people are out of service and scrambling to get it fixed.
Totally. Makes sense. Why are the sewer treatment costs from the county set to go up so much? Do we know that?
Yeah, I touched on that briefly, Mayor. A lot of that, some of that is deferred maintenance. We don't have a large say in how King County sets our rates. That's right to King County. SPU, we're actually on the operating board, so we have a bit more influence, the jurisdictions. But a good chunk of that is to prepare for the nutrient loading issue in Puget Sound. I mentioned the Department of Ecology has regulations that are coming down the pipe.
Other than that, just thank you for keeping the rate increases as low as possible. I appreciate seeing one only at 2.5% and everything's below CPI. So thank you for the work you and the team did. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to take a 10-minute break. It is 7:26. That's 7:27. I will see you back here in 10 minutes at 7:37. All right, welcome back, everyone. Before we move on to the next agenda bill, Clerk, since I wanted to see if there was anybody that wanted to give public comment.
Thank you, Mayor. We have not received any requests for public comment on this item for the public hearing. However, there are a few folks in the attendee group, as well as we have a few folks here in the audience. So if there's anyone who wishes to speak to the public hearing and this item, please use the raise hand feature or raise your hand. And it looks like we have no takers.
All right. I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I move to
Councilmember-
close the public hearing.
Second.
All right, I have a motion from Councilmember Dodd and a second from Councilmember Alders to close the public hearing. Any discussion? Nope. City Clerk?
Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns,
Yes.
Mayor Thompson,
Yes.
Councilmember Alders,
Yes.
Councilmember McNeil,
Yes?
Councilmember Mankey,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd,
Yes.
and Deputy Mayor Alcabra.
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Thank you. All right, moving on to Agenda Bill 22144, consideration of ARCH's 2023 Budget and Work Program. And I am going to turn it over to City Manager Stannard to kick us off.
All right, thank you, Mayor. And we are joined this evening online by Lindsay Masters, who is the Executive Director of a Regional Coalition for Housing, otherwise known and frequently referred to as ARCH. And tonight's item, as you mentioned, is to consider the 2023 Budget and Work Program. And we're pleased to have Lindsay joining us on what is a fairly busy week for ARCH. So I know I have at least 3 things on our calendar, and I'm sure she'll highlight something that's going on tomorrow too, so I won't steal her thunder. But Lindsay, thank you for joining us tonight, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Kyle. I've got a brief presentation that I will pull up. Just give me a moment. Okay. So as Kyle alluded to, we are not only here to talk about our budget and work program for 2023, but also just wanted to take a moment and share with you that ARCH is celebrating our 30th anniversary and kind of reflect back on some of the accomplishments over the last few decades. After that, I will walk you through our proposed administrative budget and work program, including some of the work that we are excited to be doing in partnership with Bothell. So as folks may know, ARCH was originally founded by leaders in the cities of Bellevue, Kirkland, and Redmond. King County was also a founding member. And the approach was really developed through the recommendations of a citizen task force in Bellevue that determined that it really took a collaborative approach amongst jurisdictions to tackle something as complex and difficult as affordable housing. So at the time, those partners came together through interlocal agreement and set up a framework for ARCH that has really lasted pretty close to what was originally set up in the 1990s over the years. And that is a framework that pools together our shared resources, not only funding for capital projects, but also staff resources and technical resources that has shared implementation of programs and creates efficiencies for jurisdictions working together, and that tries to create special expertise that all of our members will have access to as they pursue local housing strategies. Over the years, as you know, we have expanded our membership to now include 15 different cities in East King County, the last of which was Sammamish, which joined in 2008. This slide attempts to capture 30 years of accomplishments in one slide at a pretty high level. And collectively, there are quite a few accomplishments. As you know, we invest local resources each year from all of our members into a housing trust fund. And that strategy has yielded us over 5,200 different units that are spread out throughout the region. That has been possible through $88 million of local investments that all our members have pooled together, which has gone on to leverage another $1 billion in other public and private resources. We've now supported 10 different cities, including Bothell, to adopt local incentive or inclusionary housing programs. This is a regulatory strategy that has yielded us 2,800 affordable units with a significant number of additional units in the pipeline. We now have set up a centralized and shared system for monitoring and procedures to ensure that all those affordable units that we're creating remain affordable and stay in compliance with city program requirements. We also have stood up the largest shared equity home ownership program in the state, possibly in a multi-state region, that supports low and moderate income households be able to access home ownership in what would otherwise be a market that they are priced out of. This approach preserves affordability for the long term, but also creates equity and kind of shares equity with the homeowners. At last study over a couple years ago, we calculated that we've created over $90 million in equity for low and moderate income homeowners. Foundational to all of this is our work to support city policy and planning. And so we've also been successful in supporting a large number of different policies, local housing strategies, code amendments, and regulations at the local level. It's exciting now to see that ARCH's model has begun to expand to other regions as it's been recognized as a really successful way for jurisdictions to work together. Our approach has now been replicated in Snohomish County and most recently in South King County and Pierce County. So on to our proposed budget. 2023 represents the continuation of what's been a multi-year phased growth in ARCH's capacity. This is an initiative the ARCH Executive Board initiated starting in 2019 to try to catch our capacity up to the growth in many of the city programs that have been established over the years. Next year, we are proposing a net addition of 2 full-time positions that will be focused largely on, again, that program administration and stewardship of the affordable units that we have begun to create through city incentive programs. We've seen some pretty rapid growth in some of those programs in the last couple of years, and want to make sure we're prepared to take on all that work. We did have a discussion amongst our members about additional needs from some cities for more planning capacity. We weren't able to make a decision about adding any staff on that front, but rather we put aside some one-time funds that our member cities could tap into for additional consultant support. These new costs are allocated to base member dues. And as you may recall from past presentations, those are allocated on a per capita basis to our members. We also are projecting some increase in projected fee revenue from one of our programs that helps offset some of the new costs. Bothell's portion of the 2023 budget is $119,461, which represents over 6% of our budget. Our work program continues to kind of include these foundational pillars that you see in this slide here. One, we are going to continue supporting cities to invest in affordable housing. We have begun to pool not only general funds, but special sales tax dollars that cities have been collecting that are dedicated to affordable housing. We are also supporting the city of Bellevue with a new 0.1% sales tax funding program that they recently established. And then we are supporting many cities that have special projects that are sort of unique opportunities, primarily on public land. Hope to be doing that same work in Bothell. On the policy and planning front, we continue to support local jurisdictions as they work on policy planning and code work. We also know this is going to be a very busy year for comprehensive plan updates and expect to be supporting quite a bit of work on that. As I mentioned, our incentive program administration and stewardship, these things go hand in hand. This has been a pretty big area of growth for us in the last year or two. And outreach and education has also grown in some unexpected ways as we've seen a really significant uptick in the number of people coming to Arch looking for help to find affordable housing. We've had just over the last few years, the number of households on our list grow from about 2,000 to now over 7,000 people. So it's a big work program. It's got a lot in it that we try to continue to be able to support as opportunities arise, but we also ask our board to help us prioritize within the work program each year. And so these next couple slides call out the priorities that the board decided to elevate for 2023. Top of that list, again, is the timely work on city comprehensive plans. Not only are we going to be providing a pretty comprehensive set of housing needs data for all our members, but we are also hoping to convene the members of ARCH to really share the analysis that each city is doing to show how our comprehensive plans are going to be accommodating the housing needs that are required in the Growth Management Act. We know there's going to be an ongoing reporting requirement that comes from that as well, and so we expect to be helping cities fill that function by collecting affordable housing data and kind of being a central database for all of our cities. We have also already begun this year and are going to continue working on this next year, convening some discussions around dedicated revenue sources. We did hold some focus groups earlier this summer of elected officials from many of our member cities to talk about some of the potential options out there, some that might be coming up in the next legislative session, and are looking forward to sharing back some of that feedback with you. We are going to be continuing to expand our capacity, hopefully, if we're successful in adding those 2 staff positions. As a part of the growing incentive programs, we are also kind of at a point where we are developing some new compliance tools as city regulations evolve. As a part of those regulations, we're also looking at potential policies that we may want to recommend to reduce cost burden within affordable housing. This was an issue that cropped up this last year in particular because there was a really steep increase in the area median income, which is the foundation for how affordable rents are calculated in most of our programs. So we're kind of looking at some various policy options for how to mitigate that kind of thing in the future. We also are going to continue trying to be strategic with your local resources and being able to fund really high impact projects that are in the pipeline. We have a lot of good project opportunities, not enough resources, but we do our best to make sure all those projects eventually cross the finish line. And then we are going to be convening the board to talk about a strategic planning process. So now diving just a bit down into the work program level in Bothell, we invite each city in the work program as we put it together to let us know what you think you'll need our support on. For Bothell, of course, anything you decide that you want to implement within your housing strategy plan, we would be there to support you on that. Right now, we are very actively working on the SAMA Senior Housing Project. We are very excited that we will hope to be announcing the start of construction on that project by the end of this week. Staff are working really hard on closing the financing for that. We also are available to help identify other potential future projects that might be located in Bothell that could seek funding from the Arch Trust Fund. We know there's some potential opportunities in downtown Canyon Park and hopefully some opportunities on the city's P South property or potentially other property. We are continuing to work closely. We've had a really great partnership with the wonderful staff in Bothell to look at affordable housing incentives and requirements as a part of a lot of the different regulations you are considering adopting. And then, of course, we are very much looking forward to the implementation of those programs once there are real projects that start to take advantage of those incentives. And then kind of on the planning front, I alluded to this earlier, we do know there's a lot of new requirements from the Growth Management Act from HB 1220, and we're going to be providing some assistance with that. We will also be supporting the city's ongoing work to look at how to promote additional affordable housing options within your code. And then we have kind of a unique opportunity to bring some of our members together on the Department of Commerce grants that have been awarded to several cities in the region to promote middle housing policies. Each city, as a part of that grant, has an obligation to do outreach to underserved populations through partnering with community-based organizations. And so Arch was asked to help facilitate and kind of coordinate that work across jurisdictions. That sums up my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I'm looking for the lights. Councilmember Zorns.
Flipped it on and flipped it off. I don't know if my brain was, because thank you, you threw out a lot of good and salient information. So I don't know if my brain was going on overload and I was catching up, but you mentioned a rising AMI. Did I hear that right?
Yep.
And something that has just really troubled me for a long time is that an 80 AMI to like 120 AMI are still people who are struggling to find affordable housing around here. So I just wanted you to just elaborate more on what your thoughts and observations are with what's happening in our area with that. And that's my only question.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. Particularly in our homeownership program, which I talked about a little bit. We've got a whole range of housing in that program that is available for folks up to 120% of the median income. And we see strong demand for that. We don't have enough of it. So completely agree with your comment. The issue about the rise in the median income is kind of a separate issue that underlies how we operate a lot of the programs. So we price affordable rents and affordable sale prices based on a percentage of median income typically. And so as that median income grows, someone who's living in an affordable housing unit might experience a significant cost increase.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Councilmember Alders.
Hi, Lindsay. Thank you for the presentation. And I really appreciate the overview that you gave for 30 years of really good work in our region. And I guess, and I very much appreciate the technical assistance on comp plans coming up. One thing that I guess there's always the question of, when you look at what Bothell is doing and the ways that you are supporting our efforts, I guess what comes to mind first is some of the recent work that you've done around tenant protections, and wondering, is that something that you could add to our work plan if there was interest on council for that?
Yeah, I think we have done a little bit of work on that to date, and we sort of provided some very basic recommendations and information to all our members. And we're sort of available on an as-needed basis as cities might decide they want to do some additional thinking about it. And of course, understanding it takes the staff capacity on the city side as well. So would certainly defer to the city manager and the city staff about the timing of those things and sort of what role they'd like Arch to play in that.
Yeah, and thanks, Lindsay. I just to piggyback on that, I think if there was interest from the council, what I would propose is that we'll track interest tonight, but if there's enough, we can bring something back and sometime in November, most likely under the projected agenda, and explain more of what that would look like.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Lindsay. Arch is extremely important, I believe, and I think a lot of us do as well. And I would second this tenant protection, request. I feel like it's important, especially with rising costs, not just for purchasing, but also rents. We've heard and seen a lot of stories of people even as low as $100 a month rent increase, gets them out of that apartment. So I feel like we need to have some protections there. Can you, do you know off the top of your head what the AMI is these days?
This year it went up to 134,600 for a family of 4.
Wow.
So really, really steep increase. Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Dodd?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, Lindsay. It was very helpful. In my head, when Councilmember Aldrich talked about tenant protections, I was like, yeah, but I realized I need to say it out loud, so sign me up. Thank you.
Councilmember McNeil?
Mike? Thank you, Mayor, and congratulations once again, Lindsay. 30 years, amazing accomplishment.
Thank you.
You often look back and say where you start, and then looking forward into the future where we are today. So our region has changed immensely, right? And it's going to continue to change with, I think they're saying 1 million new people coming to our area with 2040, 2050, somewhere in there. But when we talk about affordable housing, the thing that always resonates with me is what is affordable to one might not be affordable to another. And so as we have these conversations and we talk about working within our region, for me, I want to understand when we talk about, AMI and, teachers and firefighters and police, public safety, just the average individual that lives within these communities, how are we going to create that affordable housing? So fast forward 30 years, and you've done an amazing job. But we're in unprecedented times in construction right now. Construction costs are at an all-time high. And to me, the first thing I resonate, how are we going to create affordable housing? What things are we going to do to create that affordable housing with the costs the way they are? So construction costs aren't going to come down. So someone's going to have to subsidize that construction, right? We can find public-private partnerships and things like that. When we have these discussions, I want us to also be talking about how do we work with the constructors, the developers, the builders that are going to build these homes. How do we find the subcontractors that are going to do the work, and they're going to get a fair wage for doing that work, right? But we're going to be able to create that affordable housing. I think one of your slides said something about missing middle housing. When we talk about missing middle housing, what does that really mean? What does that terminology mean, missing middle housing? Can you tell me what that means to you?
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit about kind of how that term has been used in the industry. I think it was coined some time ago to refer to housing types between a single family home and a multifamily larger scale apartment. So there's a kind of a whole range within that, from just a duplex or a cottage, so it's something still pretty small scale, but greater density than a single family home, up to triplexes, townhomes, courtyard apartments, kind of lower density apartments. Those are the housing types we don't see a lot of that are built, and that's due to a number of factors. But I think a lot of those have to do with our regulations. And so it's become a very important area of work for jurisdictions to kind of take a look at how their land use regulations and their building codes might encourage or discourage some of those other housing choices to be able to be feasible and developed.
Fabulous, thank you. And so those to me, what I think I'm hearing you say is those are housing types. But housing types don't create affordability in some
Correct.
places, correct? So that's where I want to make sure that when we're having these conversations, we're ensuring that we're communicating with the community on what housing types we're trying to do that can create affordable housing. So I think I alluded to it earlier. If you take a single family home that is $1 million and you tear it down with today's construction costs and you build two homes that are smaller, that are probably more affordable, they're still going to be more costly per square foot after you build the new home because of the cost of construction today versus when that home was built 20, 30 years ago. And so I just want to make sure that as we have these conversations and talk about affordability, we're talking about all the variables that go into that affordability. So when we talk about zoning and where we're going to put these houses, we're talking about land values on these properties that are going to increase because we've increased the density allowable on those properties. So this all comes from an experience of being in the industry for 30 years. We all need to create affordable housing. That is undeniable. We need to have it. We need to be able to allow different types of housing types. But what I'm hoping is that we can somehow separate the two and talk about them individually so that people are fully understanding when we say affordable housing, that it's affordable housing. When we say missing middle, it's housing types, which may not create affordable housing at the end. But I applaud you for the work that you're doing over 30 years. I've been dying to say that the comments that I've made here tonight. I'm part of a lot of regional committees, and I'm hearing these conversations around our region, and they haven't changed, right? I've been talking about this for 6.5 years, but the only thing I can tell you is that over that 6.5 years, and have been in construction for 30 years, we are in unprecedented times, and it's so critical that we bring all the parties together to be able to solve the problem, and that means ensuring that the developers and builders are at the table and fully understand and can help solve that problem with you and others. Thank you.
Councilmember Mankey?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Lindsay, for the presentation. Looking forward to SAMA breaking ground and being constructed. One question that I have for you is around home ownership opportunities. I think with prices ever increasing, one of the only ways to lock in your housing costs over time is through ownership. We also know that ownership builds equity, which is also important in financial stability for the long term. So I'm curious, what is Arch doing right now around ownership programs? What percentage of the work that Arch is doing pertains to ownership programs, and how can we help residents lock in those housing prices so that they don't end up in a situation where they may have affordable housing, which is affordable today, but those rents are going to continue to increase over time, and their paychecks hopefully will too, but perhaps not. They're going through life situations or whatever it may be where there's different demands. And one of the reasons why I ask is I have several friends and folks that I went to school with here that have reached out to me since I've gotten on council, and they've asked, how are you going to help make it more affordable so that we can move home? We can move home where we grew up and we could raise our own families. And I know several of us up here on the dais were fortunate enough to buy in about 10 years ago when housing prices were very low and we would not be able to afford our houses today. And so we consider ourselves fortunate, but we also look to help the others in our community. And really with that home ownership opportunity, that's one way to do that.
Yeah, no, I love that question. A lot of what Arch staff does is work to administer our homeownership program. It's smaller in size than our rental program, but is a little bit more labor intensive because we are actually involved in each resale. Every time a home resells, we're involved with that. We also kind of directly manage the wait list for those homes, and there is a really high demand, as you might imagine, for affordable ownership homes in East King County. The way that we are able to create new supply for those programs is by having cities like Bothell make sure that you have regulations that promote the building of ownership housing together with the requirement for affordability. And that's something that's really important as you entertain allowing greater density, especially of those middle housing types. If you want to ensure that you capture some of that value back for affordable housing, that's really important to put in your regulations. We have that in a number of cities throughout the region, and that's why we have been able to have such a robust program. We have, for example, in Redmond, a citywide inclusionary program so that when they see new ownership housing built, we get 10% of those units to be affordable homes. We have similar arrangements in other cities. And that's how we create that kind of that new affordable housing supply. But we don't have enough places where those regulations are in place. So we are excited kind of to see where the middle housing conversations go and to see how we can really incorporate affordability into those opportunities so that it actually results in something that's truly affordable for folks.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The second question I had is around MFTE. I'm sorry to say I don't know enough about our program to really speak to it, but I'm curious, do you help cities look at their program to see if it's accomplishing the goals that it set out to accomplish? And looking back at the data that's been collected since it was established, are you able to help us improve it if there is a possibility of improvement?
Yeah, I think your program's new enough that there's probably not going to be a lot of data yet. Probably needs a little bit more time to kind of test the outcomes. But something we can do maybe that's a little more proactive is talk to any kind of project developers that you know are working in your city, kind of interview them to see how they're assessing the program, make sure they know about what the incentive really adds up to, and sort of do a bit of a litmus test on how the market is responding to it.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for all the work that you and your predecessors have done at Arch over the last 30 years. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dodd?
Thank you. I just wanted to follow back up when we were talking about housing types, missing middle versus housing affordability. So I was until recently, on our planning commission, so I got to work closely with Mike Stanger from Arch and, of course, Dave Boyd from Community Development here in Bothell. And in the plan that the commission is working on for us, affordability is tied into adding that density. So that's a conversation that we're combining in Bothell, which is really exciting. So I just wanted to follow up on the concerns you brought up, Councilmember McNeil, because it is exciting to see adding density and adding those affordability requirements right in there when you're building units too. So thanks. And Mike's doing great work. He's really great to work with.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you for coming out here tonight. I really appreciate virtually coming out here tonight.
Thank you for letting me join virtually. My family appreciates it.
Our pleasure. The first thing that I thought when you put up the slide that said you've been doing this since 1992 is, wow, we realized housing affordability was a problem in 1992. And oh my gosh, I wish I could buy a house at 1992 prices right now. The problem's gotten so much worse since then, even though you guys have done such great work. And it's a really intimidating problem. I am super excited to hear that SAMA is going to get started soon, and I'm really glad the project on Peace South is on your radar as well. I know that's something we're excited about continuing the conversation around. I saw you had CDUs on your list. Are there cities in the area that are considering those as a solution or adding the ability to build that type of housing?
Yeah, there are some places where it's already allowed in limited zones, and we have seen some projects built. And I think right now where we're seeing consideration of that expanding is in the city of Bellevue. They're taking a look at adopting some new regulations that would make it easier to build what they would call micro housing.
Awesome, fantastic. In terms of the tenant protections that Councilmember Aldrich's brought up, I actually saw on social media a post yesterday, someone had a $500 per month rent increase. And right before your agenda bill, we had an agenda bill talking about water fees, and those are enterprise funds that have to pay for themselves, and we might have to raise those about $5 a month. And I heard a lot of concern, rightfully so, about costs continuing to go up. Deputy Mayor Alcabra brought up that those compound on each other year after year. And we're that concerned about $5 a month when people's rent is going up $500 per month. So I would be roughly 100 times more excited to talk about that and have those brought back. If there's a chance you could come and present some of those options to us and specifically what those were, I'd love to know kind of how some of those are going. I know other cities adopted those some months back, but I'd just like to add my voice to the choir, calling for that conversation to be had as well. So thank you so much for all the work you do. We really appreciate it, and we're looking forward to seeing you. I think we're good.
Well, you do have a resolution before you tonight.
We have yes, we do have a recommended action. Councilmember Dodd.
I move the recommended action.
Second.
All right, I have a motion from Councilmember Dodd and a second from Councilmember Mankey to approve the proposed resolution to authorize payment of $119,461 from the general fund to Arch for 2023 membership dues, and authorize the redirection of all funds collected from the state shared sale tax revenue in 2022 to the Arch Housing Trust Fund. Any discussion? Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be supporting the motion tonight, and I do look forward to having open communications with Arch in our city and our community to ensure that we can bring some affordable housing to our community. And I'm also looking forward to having further discussions on the MFTE program that we currently have in the city of Bothell. I know there was a project that was slated to go. Hopefully we can do some work around that and ensure that that project does go for microhousing within our community. Thank you.
City Clerk.
Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns,
Yes.
Mayor Thompson,
Yes.
Councilmember Alders,
Yes.
Councilmember McNeil,
Yes?
Councilmember Mankey,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd,
Yes.
and Deputy Mayor Alcabra.
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Lindsay, thank you. We'll see you soon.
Thank you so much.
I'm
See
waving
you
at the
soon.
computer screen in front of me. That's probably weird, but bye. All right, next up, we have a study session, Agenda Bill 22145, Board and Commission Review Results and Recommendations. City Manager.
Yeah, and tonight is, we do have this one study session in front of you, and it's the first of a couple to be able to dive in deeper into some findings and share some thoughts around boards and commissions. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Becky Range, who has been leading the charge.
Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members, thank you for your time tonight. Just a reminder, we are here just to have another discussion about our board and commission review, so we won't be taking any action tonight. So maybe takes a little bit of pressure off, since this is the last item of the night. So if you will remember, we were here a couple of months ago to talk about starting a review of our advisory bodies and our board and commissions. You had requested that of us. And so tonight, what I'd like to do is just let you know about some of our initial findings and some of our potential recommendations, and just let you hear a little bit about what we're learning and have some better discussion. We started this process not really knowing how robust it might be. We're finding that it's a pretty complicated process, and there's a lot that we're learning, and so we thought it would be great to come back and get more of your feedback and more of your guidance and direction, take that back to staff so that we can do a little bit more work on your behalf. So just some quick reminders for anyone who might be watching tonight. A very long time ago, our early Bothell Municipal Code established most of our current board and commissions that we have today. In the last few years, we've also made some changes and improvements. You might remember in 2017, we created the Arts Commission. In 2020, we added youth positions to both the Arts Commission and the Parks and Recreation Board, which was very exciting. And then, as I mentioned earlier, this year, we decided that Bothell's growing and changing. And so we need to think about how we engage with our community, how we interact with our community. Boards and commissions is just one tool that you have in your toolkit for community engagement. So it's important that we do it well. Inclusive and authentic community engagement is really key for us all doing our jobs well. So we do have 10 permanent standing bodies today that you have appointed members to. And then we do have some 2 advisory committees that are ad hoc. The Telling Bothell's Full Story is a temporary committee that was started to help update Bothell's historical narrative. We have the City DEI Advisory Committee that was created to help our DEI consultant develop the racial equity plan. And then coming soon, we will have a Police DEI Advisory Committee. I don't want to steal the police department's thunder, but I thought it was important to let you know tonight that they have been working with our DEI consultant to put together an advisory team for the police department, and you'll be hearing a little bit more about that soon. So when we were here in July, we talked about the study framework, and we talked about the different areas that we would take a look at and to see if you had any other ideas for us. We know that we need to talk about strategy and philosophy of our boards and commissions and our community engagement. We studied some administrative issues. We looked at a couple of different areas. Could we be more effective? Could we be more efficient with not only staff time, but with the board members' time? Because a lot of these volunteers are also very busy, and so we want to make the best use of their time. We studied inclusivity and representation. We are at the beginning stages of our DEI journey, and we know that we have some work to do in that area, but it was helpful, I think, to look at it from that lens. We took a look at the actual involvement in decision-making, and how does that actually happen? Where does it need to happen more? And we all believe it should be happening, but when you get down to like the practical processes for how boards and commissions are actually involved, there's some gaps there. We'll talk about some of those. So the way we did our review, we did conduct some research. We did a survey of your current board and commission members, and these survey results are in your packet. We'll go over a few of those themes tonight, but you do have the full raw results. And I also realized we haven't sent out the raw results to the board and commission members yet, but we will do that tomorrow so that they have all the results as well. We did do some research with other cities. Some of us have been in other cities, and we can draw on that experience. And we also talked to other cities about what practices they're using, what works for them, what doesn't work. We also did some interviews with staff and the liaisons who are actually assisting the boards and commissions. And of course, our clerk's office and legal office have a lot of great insight as well. So in this process, there's a lot of things that we uncovered. There's a lot of small administrative things. And many of those things I don't really want to bore you with tonight. There's some documentation and administrative items and staff operational things that we really need to do to just clean up how we do our boards and commissions. I'll touch on some of those tonight. But what we really want to do tonight is talk to you about some of the bigger issues, the more complicated things that we need your feedback on. We need you to discuss amongst yourselves and tell us what you think, so we can go back and work that into our study and our process. So I'm just going to jump right into some of the findings. And there's a lot of material here. I'll try to go through it pretty quickly, but if you have any questions, let me know. We can also hold questions at the end, but please don't hesitate to ask me to clarify anything. So, not a surprise, we all believed that we probably had a lack of a defined strategy and philosophy when it comes to our board and commissions. We grew pretty quickly as a city. we don't have all the processes in place that we probably should have. And so it's really time to clarify exactly what you think the purpose and role of these advisory bodies should be. It was pretty consistent. Sometimes staff liaisons aren't sure what the exact purpose and role of a board or commission is. Sometimes the actual board and commission members aren't quite sure what their purpose and role is. And it's not the fault of anyone. It's just each of the boards and commissions are a little bit unique as well. But so sometimes there's confusion. Another common theme that you'll see in the survey results is that some of your board and commission members feel like they have a lot of expertise. They bring a lot of value to your decision making, and many of them do not feel like they're being utilized. They don't feel like they are actually incorporated into the decision-making process, and they feel like they have more value. And I thought that was really important that they shared that with us. Many of the members also requested that they would really like to have more interaction with you. Some of the members also would like to have more interaction with the city manager. We'll have more findings that we'll talk about, but I want to just talk real quick about some initial recommendations. This is for this particular set of findings, this is pretty impactful. One of the things that we found is that we can address several of the findings tonight, or the findings that we uncover the next few weeks. We can address that from a staff perspective, which is some documentation. We know some things need to be done, but perhaps we need to develop a board and commission protocol manual, much like your council protocol manual, where we actually publish things, document processes, and share things. We also have a community engagement framework that also has its own set of documents. So I just wanted to say, you may hear us talk about things, well, hey, that's something that needs to be published in the protocol manual that we're developing for boards and commissions. That's something that we might need to put in the community engagement toolkit and tie back to that manual. So we'll worry about where all those things should go, but if you hear us using terms like that, just don't hesitate to ask us questions, but we're just organizing ourselves on how we can document some of these things. One of the most important things that we need to clarify, document, and publish is the purpose and role of your boards and commissions. And there's two aspects to that. There is this overarching engagement philosophy that we need to decide for all boards and commissions. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. It's pretty high level, but like what, in theory, how do you want your boards and commissions to be? How do you want them to interact with us? How much input, power, or authority would you actually like for them to have? That's across all the boards and commissions. But an important second aspect to defining the purpose and role is when we talk about the individual boards and commissions. So I will tell you, boards and commissions, they have a different character and a vibe and a different level of energy and participation. Some of them want to do things very differently than others, and that's okay, but we need to start clarifying and documenting what they'll actually be doing so that it helps staff have clarity and it helps everyone know what's going to be happening with that activity. So I want to jump right in and dig a little bit deeper into this notion of the purpose and roles. And I want to be honest with you, there's a little bit of discrepancies, a little bit of confusion. And so in the survey, and as we talk with staff, and as we hear from all of you, we tried to distill down what you think the purpose and role might be. And so I've listed those here. And so the top one is actually what most of the board and commission members voted for. Like, they think that an advisory body exists to share authority and co-create vision, policy, and solutions with our community. That is a very important, high-level type of community engagement. That's for cities. That's about as extensive as it gets when you think about the continuum of community engagement. One of the things that most people agree on, advisory bodies should assist and advise council as they make decisions. Not super controversial. They should help capture and apply diverse input to all the work that we do. Your boards and commissions help build authentic relationships with people and community groups. The board and commission members didn't mention this much, but staff really believes that board and commissions provide civic training and a pathway for more public involvement and public service. And I wanted to put this one at the end, as this is also a little bit different depending on who you talk to. Some advisory bodies believe that they would like to complete more hands-on work for specified projects, plans, events, or programs, if that's what their board would really like to do. So I want to talk about these in just a little bit more detail. This top bullet of sharing authority and co-creating vision, that is a little bit difficult for boards and commissions to do because they don't have a lot of time, and if their role is to advise you, that's already taking up a lot of their time. I think sometimes when we think about that sharing authority and co-creating vision and policy, that's often for a large project, something big that's limited time and duration. The only example I can really think of is, think about when we did the downtown plan. We got a lot of people from the community together. They met for a long period of time, but they were all focused on working together and creating this plan for how downtown would unfold. I'm not saying that your boards and commissions, you might want them to have this level of community engagement, but that's up to you. That's something I think we're going to need to discuss. And then just to draw your attention back down to that bottom bullet, I think we really need to decide how boards and commissions are going to function throughout the year. And if they do take, in addition to the advisory role, they take on more of a hands-on role and take on projects. There were a few open-ended comments that some of your board and commissioners provided here, and I wanted to just put those on the screen. So some of your board and commissioners also believe that advisory bodies exist to do some of these things. I do think these are very unique to specific board and commissions. So I think as they start to define what they want to do with their board and commission, these might apply there, although some of them are general and could be applied citywide. So moving on to another grouping of findings, we heard pretty loud and clear that each of the board and commissions or advisory bodies, they need clear goals, priorities, work plans, both for their individual bodies, and also they need to know what council's priorities are. They don't know. They admitted that they're not quite sure what direction they should be going. And so we have some thoughts on how to improve that. There's also a desire for more interaction with more council members and also with other boards. And as I mentioned before, some of them would really like to be involved more in decision-making. So as we discussed with staff, a few of the things that we could do that could address some of these findings, not all of them. We have talked about this before. We think maybe you should consider assigning council liaisons to permanent bodies. That doesn't mean that council members would attend board and commission meetings. In fact, we don't always think that's super productive, because when you're in the room, those conversations might go a little bit differently. But at least it would give them an ambassador, a liaison that they could work with. We also think we've talked about bodies attending city council meetings to give updates or engage in discussion with you, but we haven't really quite formalized that. So we could schedule those out all throughout the year, give them time and a platform to come and speak with you during your council meetings. We also are really excited about an annual fall joint session workshop meeting with all the boards and commissioners. Wouldn't it be great to set up a workshop to have them all in this room at the same time? We could have some facilitated discussions. They could talk to each other about things they're working on, things they're advising on. That's pretty exciting, and I think that would be fairly easy to do. One of the things that we've been brainstorming with Kyle and others who've experienced this in other cities if we also make some shifts to our appointment cycle and the way we fill the vacancies, things would be tied in a little bit more to other city processes. This is completely brainstorming. This is not actually, permanent or even probably all that accurate right now. But right now, especially during election year, when new council members are seated in January, that's a lot of activity. So we're busy trying to get new council members in place. We traditionally did our recruitment and outreach for the board and commissions at the same time in January, February, so that they could be seated by April 1st. What we think might help is, what if we take that recruitment window and we push it later in the year? So instead, we help new council members be seated earlier in the year. Sometime January, February, March, April, council has a priority setting session. And then we start the recruitment and outreach application window for your boards and commissioners. And then you do your interviews and appointments in May, and then in June, their new terms start. So what that does, it gives all of you time to appoint liaisons to board and commissions if you'd like. It gives us time to know what your priorities are, and then we can brief the new boards and commissions or the new members really soon about what your council priorities are. It would take a little bit of time if you opted to go in this direction to kind of shift the schedules, but we're pretty excited about this option. And so when we think about shifting this vacancy and then we get the new boards and commissions in place, does it make sense? This is something we'd like to discuss more. Should advisory bodies then think about what their plans are for the next year, so they know what your priorities are? Then do they meet as a group and say, well, what do we want to do? Do we need to plan out what we're going to be working on, annual work plans? And they can be brief and short. Do they want to do some kind of charter that says, hey, City Council, what is your plan for us? And if they do that, when would we do it? I think towards, close to when they're seated would be helpful. And then something that we're all debating and talking about, when we think about how to include board and commissioners into the actual decision-making process, should we really solidify their official coordination on major agenda items during the agenda planning process? I know that staff probably has anxiety whenever we talk about this, because culturally that's not really how we do our agenda planning, and it would take a lot to get there. But big items coming up, would you like to see officially coordination from a particular board or commission on that agenda item before it actually gets to you? So just a few other basic administrative and procedural standards are lacking across all departments. I won't really bore you too much with this, but lots of things we just need to clean up. We did go through defining the different types of actual advisory bodies. There is a list of what that sample verbiage might be in your packet. We want to make it really clear so that whenever we need to do community engagement, we know exactly what we should be using: a board or commission or a task force or an advisory committee. So we just cleaned up some of that language. We need to standardize how we do meeting attendance, meeting format, chair elections, and staff has kind of stepped through that. We did talk about, we get some requests to stream or record all meetings, and that's really difficult to do just with limited resources. One of the things we noticed too is that we have no standard term lengths. So if you look at all the terms, they range from 2, 3, 4, 5, some even go to 6. So you could potentially try to align your term lengths potentially with council terms. For example, the Arts Commission is a 3-year term right now. What if you change it to a 4-year term? Landmark could change from a 5 to a 4-year term. Parks could change from 3 to a 4-year term. And you're probably wondering, why would we do that? Because it's a logistical and administrative challenge for staff and for clerks to just manage all the different terms. And many cities kind of align it in this way. I will say, though, if you change the terms to longer, doesn't mean you might not get as many people to apply, because they don't want to do that commitment. So say, for example, if Parks changed to a 4-year versus a 2-year, would maybe someone not apply? And that's something we could all work through get more feedback from staff on. And then we had a lot of discussion about limited resources limits capacity. One of the things I really want to be clear about is, why wouldn't we have a lot of boards and commissions? Why wouldn't we do that? It's wonderful. It's wonderful to get people from the community involved and engaged, but it does take time. It takes time from staff. It takes time to interact with all the members. It takes time from IS to set up their technology. It takes time from communications. And there's lots of different tests to the staff capacity. So just keep that in the back of your mind. That's why we don't have, as many boards and commissions as we may like. But so we did take a look at how we could be more efficient. One of the things that's interesting is some of the board members actually told us that they wish they had more staff working with them. They wish they had more attention from staff, which I was surprised. I didn't expect that in the survey. They commented sometimes about staff turnover and how they just wish that staff was a little bit more devoted to their board or commission, and we understand that. There were some requests for a permanent DEI board. We did talk a lot about the library board. It does function very differently than most of the boards and commissions, and they operate a little bit differently. They're more similar to like a KCLS support role. There was a lot of comments about the Shorelines Board. They are actually not required by code, which surprised me. They're only needed intermittently, and so they don't meet very often, except for if there's a project that they're working on, and then they stand up and do some work, but they work very intermittently. And we did talk about some of these statutory boards, the civil service, left one, and salary boards. How could we make any changes or efficiencies there? And there's not a lot of opportunity to make too many changes there. So we do have some work to do for inclusivity and representation. I think we all admit that. We don't have a lot of formal processes in place to make sure all of our groups are represented on boards. We have certain demographic groups, underrepresented groups, that need to be actively engaged and reached out to participate in our city government. And it doesn't happen. And so we need to put some formal processes in place that will help us inch a little bit closer to that. And there's some things we can do there. They seem like baby steps, but one of the consensus items is that when we are talking about a diversity 101 training with our DEI consultant that would happen with staff, that also needs to be developed and provided to board and commissions. That as a minimum, that needs to happen. We should report our board demographic makeup earlier on in the process to help inform the recruitment process and then also help you make your eventual appointments. So if we look at the demographics, if the board and commissioners give us their demographics, which many of them already have, it helps us to know how do we go out and recruit and make sure that these advisory bodies mirror what your community actually looks like. There was a few comments about compensating members to be on a board or commission. This is really important. If you are low income and you work a job that makes it difficult for you to come to meetings, it is becoming a more and more common and acceptable practice to more fully compensate people so that we can have that representation on our board. I do think it's something we need to study, and we need to talk a little bit more about that. The only body right now that's compensated is the Planning Commission because they have additional meetings and additional workload. And then we need to continue to evaluate participation barriers. Are you having meetings that everyone can get to? If you have a hybrid meeting, can someone even participate? Maybe they're hearing impaired. Are they able to participate fully? There's lots of participation barriers that we need to think about. Okay, so that was a lot of information, and I'm sure you have a lot of questions, but I want this to be your time to discuss just some of the things that you've heard tonight and give us any feedback that you would like to help us move forward in this process.
Councilmember Dodd.
Thank you. Thanks, Becky. That's really good information. I think the overall tenor of my thoughts is basically, I agree we need to revise our boards and commissions. And I think the ones that we focus on and we back. We need to back fully. We need to record the meetings. They need to be available. We should see a section on YouTube for every commission that we choose to keep, because why would we have something and not be dedicated to it? What does that say about what that board and commission is doing in our city? I realize, and that I think is a technical lift, and I totally get that, but it's so important, and it also helps all of us and the rest of the city know what these boards and commissions are doing. If we don't go to these meetings physically, then that content is just lost, and it's, condensed into minutes maybe, and that's never really a whole meeting when you just read the minutes. So I really feel very strongly about that, and I think that needs to be part of how we decide where we can find, maybe if there's two boards doing similar things, we can expand it and to have those people, anyway, there's a lot of ways to go there. I also think compensation is super important. I look forward to hearing about different models, because I can already think of different ways to do it, and I am not an expert on how to pay people. But I was lucky enough to participate on planning with a small child because I had a supportive family, a supportive other parent of my child, and there were people there. If I was on my own, he would have either been at the meetings with me or I wouldn't have been there. So, and that's just a child. There's people who have other dependents, people who have just a time crunch, where we were just talking about how expensive it is to live here. So taking that time for your community, it's not about, someone just trying to get money. It's about making sure that we respect people's time and that their input is valuable and that we compensate them accordingly so that they can continue to participate. So I think those are something I would strongly want to prioritize as we go into this discussion. I'm reading my very weird notes here just to make sure that I get everything. I think aligning terms is also really important. I'm not going to say that I'm like super firm on it has to be 4 years, but it should be the same for all the boards and commissions. And my goodness, just the headache alone for the city clerk's office is enough to say, let's line that up, I really like the idea of the cycle moving to really align with when council does their activities too. And I will stop talking now, but this is a very exciting topic for me, so thank you.
Councilmember Zorns?
Okay. I also have notes scribbled all over the place. I'll try to be more concise than my notes are. The idea of sharing authority and co-creating vision could be a great idea, or it could be a disaster. Not only just, large project demands, but elected. And so we need to make sure that when we are creating agenda topics, that the people who are making those decisions are people who have been elected by almost 50,000 people in Bothell. So yes, but with kid gloves. Does that make sense? I think sharing a vision, creating policies is great, but don't get too happy, if that makes sense. I appreciate every time we get candidates, we get to find out where they live in Bothell. That's super helpful. So I appreciate that piece. Open to compensating. You had the potential changes might include, and so instead of listing them off and saying yes to all of them, I'm just going to tell you yes to all of them. Does that help? The question about KCLS, do they in other cities have their own community boards? Would KCLS prefer to create their own library board? Or with the city of Bothell having the library board, does that kind of guarantee that the people of Bothell have a seat at the table with KCLS? That's my question to you.
That's a great question. Some cities have kept their library boards even after KCLS was envisioned and came on board. I think, oh gosh, it's hard to, I don't know if Robin might be able to, she works with the library board quite a bit. The library system, they do have, I think, their own border commissions, and they have groups that work with them and support them, like the Friends of the Bothell Library and those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, in a way, our library board would ensure that they have a connection and a formal relationship with library staff. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's important. I don't want the people of Bothell who heavily use the library to have less of a voice on the library. So I guess that's my question is that if they're not already doing that in other cities, protect the board that we have right now. And then, let's make sure I covered all the things on this page. Yes, I love the idea of getting boards to work together, because a lot of magic could happen there. And yes, moving to 4-year staggered terms, that makes a lot of sense. In the discussion of DEI, I would like, and I'm sitting here thinking, how would you do this? Is that often when I'll just tell you my point of view and what's important to me is that when I talk with people, I'll ask them a few questions. And usually I ended up with saying, I'm firstborn, I've raised 5 children, I think I know everything, but chances are I'm going to miss something. So I welcome a different point of view, and please speak up, please hold, our feet to the fire. And I have noticed it's not just currently, but in years past, we will get assigned people to boards and commission who will all be pretty much on the same page, reflecting the majority, not all of council, but reflecting the majority of that council. And so what you get filtered up from the boards and commissions is a point of view that represents 4 people. Sometimes everybody, but represents 4 people. And to me, we sell ourselves short because even though I like to think I know everything, sometimes somebody from standing on another, looking at this bottle, standing on the other side of it, sees something that I don't see. And that point of view is really important to have, because otherwise I would have missed it. Maybe not, not intentionally, but I would have missed it. And so how do we guarantee a variety of people at the table with different points of view in all our boards and commissions? And I don't know how you make that magic happen. The only thing that I could say is maybe when we have our pool, say there's four seats that are up in a certain board or commission. 2 of those seats are the top vote getters, got the top votes, and 2 of those seats are the people who got votes but were the fewest votes. And maybe we would get some more varied opinions without putting those boards and commission, those candidates on the spot of like, where do you really stand on? But maybe that tool might give us a little more diversity. That's just an idea. But I would love to see a little more scrapping and point and counterpoint and get some robust conversations going. I say that from only just watching Planning Commission and LTAC. I have no idea what's happening with parks and our other groups, and you may already have that going on, but that's my 2 bits. And thank you for waiting through this. I'm so grateful you're doing it and not us.
Councilmember Aldrichs?
Thank you, Mayor. I basically went just as following along with you and said yes to the things that I liked. And if I don't mention it, I didn't have a strong reaction. So get ready, tally marks or however you're going to do this. Okay. So yes, I very much like the concept. Oh, let me start with the proposed schedule. I like the proposed schedule with some caveats. I do think that starting on a new board or commission in June is too late, because I know that summer is often disrupted. And so to start in June and then to have those disruptions, I feel like they don't really get to coalesce and form as a body until September. Because I know, at least for parents with kids, that will be how it is. And so my thought, because I love that you've included council priority setting earlier in the year. What if recruitment happens simultaneously as council priority setting is happening? That way we could move the the start, the interviews and the start of people joining the boards and commissions, at least to like April, May. And that gives them like introduction orientation before they get they get the disruption, and then they can come back and be ready to go in September. Just a thought. But yes, and please, so much please, council priority setting earlier in the year. That was something that many of the newer, I think there was a lot of agreement on that as council priorities that we would be able to get to it sooner in the year, especially after elections. So yes, having served on the planning commission, I really appreciated having an annual work plan, and I do think that each committee would, just to have goals and purpose and meaning, and it's great for each group to have their own annual work plan. I love the idea of presenting it to council so that we can take that into account during our priority setting, or that it can, however which way that it occurs. And I very much, we kind of started it at the beginning of the year where we talked about bringing in boards and commissions to present to council on a regular basis. And we did some of that. Like, I think I remember hearing from 2 boards or commissions before we stopped. And I really enjoy those. Partly because our library team they're just rock stars. And I think that there are a lot of very dedicated people who are involved on our boards and commissions that we haven't had a chance to hear from. And I really, really want to hear from them. I want to celebrate their work and honor their commitment to our community. So let's just make that more standard. And ask for volunteers from the boards or commissions to be like, hey, we know that we're going to do this once or twice a year. Who's on board next? And when is that next one happening? Just always knowing that the next one is coming and there's somebody committed to it. Yes to a policy manual for boards and commissions. And that could be one policy manual for all of them with sections for each of them. I'm in support of changing the term lengths just to ease the burden on staff. That if we could handle it every 4 years, which we know is because they're often rolling, that it's really every 2 years. It just can reduce just the number of times in a year that a staff member is working on term things. So I am definitely a yes to a permanent DEI board or commission. And do you want me to save questions, or can I intersperse questions with my yeses?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Do you want questions, or I'll keep them to the end?
Whatever you prefer.
Whatever I want to do. Okay, I'm right here. It's in my notes. My question is, were there also requests for a Human Services Board or Commission when you were getting information from the current people serving?
There wasn't really request for a Human Services Commission. We've talked about it, the value of having that in staff. I just think a lot of the people that were surveyed aren't really aware of the Human Services Program or needs, so I think that's why it probably wasn't suggested.
Okay. I know that the Human Services Committee with Council has definitely expressed a desire and a want for that. And so I wonder if that were to be pitched to our current board members and commissioners, if it's partly that, relationship between, that if they knew that that's where at least, our committee was coming from, where would they fall on that? I'd be curious to know. One question, so you said you didn't recommend many changes or any changes to the statutory boards, but I do know that some of them have the longer term lengths. And so I'm wondering, would you recommend the standardizing term lengths for the statutory boards as well, or is that written in law that cannot be changed?
I don't think so, just based on feedback from the staff liaison, who knows it much better than I do. They didn't really feel like there were many changes they could make there in the term lengths or in combining the boards or anything like that.
Okay. Love the idea for DEI training for all boards. Yes, please. Yes to study compensation and participation barriers. I think that your timing on that for, bringing that back in 2023 makes a lot of sense. So please. I want to echo Councilmember Dodd. I almost called you Commissioner Dodd, having a throwback moment. The request that meetings should be available in public record more than just minutes. But I also, at the same time, noticed that the minutes that are available in the Agenda Center are not all linked to their actual board page on the website. And so, just because it's one place, it should be consistently in all places. So like, for example, we have, on the Agenda Center, you can find the minutes to the library board, but from the library board, it doesn't link to the Agenda Center. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to see those connections being made so that there can be a more transparent public process. But also, if we were to accomplish that technological lift of having each of those recorded and available for public consumption on 2-speed, because we all know that everybody watches after the fact on 2-speed, that would be, I think that's a way to engage more people and help people be more informed about what is happening at the city level. And last question. Sorry. I see on the website that Safe Schools and Sidewalks Task Force has an agenda, they have agenda meetings in the Agenda Center. But are they a board and commission? And if they are, should they be linked on the boards and commissions page?
I believe they were just an ad hoc advisory committee, and I think they've since disbanded, but I'll check and make sure.
I do know that there has been, there continues to be interest, like we have the DEI advisory committee, which is ad hoc listed. Mm-hmm. And so like, if we're listing ad hocs, let's list ad hocs. Mm-hmm. And there's also interest from members of the community to see the sidewalks task force continue, to be available so that communication, because there's always sidewalks and safe school routes questions and concerns, to be able to keep, not that we need to necessarily make it in perpetuity, but we know that the work isn't done. We know that the levy is still in effect, and we know that that the work plan might have changes. Whatever is happening there, I've heard just a number of community members saying, how do I talk to them? How do I get information about what's going on? And I think linking them to the boards and commission page would help with that. And that is the end of my list.
That's great feedback. I will say there is a little bit of a long-term plan and vision for incorporating boards and commissions into the new agenda management software. So it'll take a little bit of time, but you will see some improvements, I think, on the website and how different things are posted and shared and linked with that new software. So, good.
Councilmember Mankey.
Thank you, Mayor. I have, I think, retyped most of what I want to say, so I'm going to try to work from my list here. First and foremost, I want to say thank you for doing this work. I know it was a lot of work, and you came back with a lot of good insight and recommendations, so I want to thank you for that. And then overall, however we plan to proceed, I think it's really important that we make sure our boards and commissions do have a mission and a purpose, and that it's understood so they can work and accomplish what they're there to accomplish, and it's meaningful. And to echo what Councilmember Aldrich said, I think we want to honor their time and their commitment to the community, and that's, I think, one of the essential things that we really want to get out of this. In terms of the recommendations, there's a lot of things I like, so I'll just run through them real quick. I like the policy manual for boards and commissions idea. It's important to set people up successfully when they come in and really understanding what they're there to do and what the expectations of the role are. And having served on a couple of different boards and commissions, I believe when I came into the first one, I didn't read the Bothell Municipal Code to fully understand what the role was. And I think I picked it up a couple months later and read through it, and it was long and extensive for that commission because it was by RCW that it was established. So once I understood that, I was able to better participate and be a good member of that commission. So I think having that, it would be a great thing for new appointees. I also think that shifting the appointment timeline to give staff time to onboard and for council to create goals before bringing folks on board would be really helpful. I like the idea of standard term lengths where we can and aligning those things for efficiency. I know it's a lot of work for staff to bring people in, to recruit, bring everything before us and all the appointment process. So I do like that efficiency. I like the idea of combining similar boards and commissions also for efficiency and just to make sure they stay busy, they stay active, they stay engaged. I know it's really difficult to be on a board or commission that only meets once a year. The left board's one of those boards. We have one at-large member, and it's hard to stay engaged. It's hard to stay active and really keep up with what the role is when it's not meeting monthly or even quarterly. So I'm in support of that. I like having a council member assigned to each board and commission, even if they don't attend. I think it's very important to have somebody there that they feel comfortable reaching out to. I know we know a lot of them just from involvement or whatever it may be, attending events. We've had a lot of introductions, but I think there's others that just don't have that connection. And so having somebody there, maybe at the opening meeting, introducing themselves, letting the commission or board know that they're available in case they need anything or want to have a private conversation, I think that could really help build those relationships. I like the once-a-year gathering of all boards and commissions with council. Even if it's a special meeting, I think that would be very valuable. Again, building relationships, one-off conversations always spark new ideas, and it's a good organic way to do that. I know just prior to the pandemic, the city had set up some informal gatherings in the hall, and I got to go to one of those meetings, and then COVID hit, and I think right after that they were canceled. So I did find that valuable, meeting other council members and board members that I didn't see regularly. I think that boards and commissions should weigh in on policy matters before they come to council. That may be a controversial opinion. I know it's really difficult for staff to do that because it delays pushing things through the system, and we already have a tough enough time doing that. So I don't know how we can facilitate that, but I do think it is important. We do it with Planning Commission right now, but I think we have opportunities with some of the other boards and commissions. Park, I know Park does the pros plan periodically, but there's other things that they can, I think, weigh in on if we're considering parks projects and other events, Arts Commission, etc. I do also think we should allow boards and commissions to go hands-on with events where it makes sense. I think if they're passionate, we should bring them in and allow them to help and advise. And summer nights, 4th of July, I don't know if there's anything that can be done, but I know those are really taxing on staff. Maybe having more volunteers is even more taxing, I don't know. But I do like the enthusiasm, and I want to encourage the enthusiasm. So if there is a way to incorporate our volunteers, our appointees into those things, I think it would be incredibly valuable, and they could add a lot of value and gain a lot of value themselves. In terms of audio recordings and recordings of meetings, I do like having them available to the public. I know that is also a tough burden. Being on Civil Service Commission, our running joke was that the recorder was around before the city was, and sometimes it wouldn't record, and I know they were sent to the state for record keeping, which is not made available very easily to residents. So I don't know if there's a way we can do audio recording. I don't think we need to video record everything, but even if we could just do an audio recording and have it on the website or post it to YouTube, that could be valuable for anybody and show our transparency. And I know there's probably very few people that will ever review them, but it's good to have them there. And I like open government. I like allowing people to go and have on-demand access to records that we have. So I think that is everything. I will mention looking at compensating participants. I think that's an interesting idea. I don't know what other cities are doing right now, but it is a taxing thing for someone to take time away from family, from work, or whatever it may be. And if we're able to compensate them for that time, I think that could be a very good thing. So I look forward to additional information and study on that. Thank you again for all the work that you did, and I look forward to talking more solutions next week.
Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor. That's a tough act to follow because he pretty much touched on almost all of my stuff, but I'll give it a shot. I just have a couple more things. Ensuring that we have a manual and a work plan, I think, for our boards and commissions would be important. So at least they know what they're going to be working on, and if that's available ahead of time, then when they volunteer to potentially be on that board or commission, they'll know what that work plan looks like. So I think that would be important. Let's see. Understanding the types and being intentional with the diversity piece, I think, is important. So we use the word diversity, equity, and inclusion a lot. And so I think, what does that mean? What does that look like when we talk about our boards and commission, and be intentional with who we're saying we want to be and participating on the boards and commissions. Let's see. Hybrid meetings, recording meetings. I think Councilmember Mankey touched on the recording piece. I think it's a great idea to have that recording. You know, if you might not be able to attend, but you're able to listen at a later date time, I think would be important. A lot of times I go back and I listen to stuff, meetings, things like that. So having that available would be important. Compensation, I think, is an interesting topic. I'd be curious to know if other cities are paying their boards and commissions, what that looks like. Tagging on to that, it would be important to kind of understand if we record, if we're paying compensation, what does that look like for our overall budget, right? Mm-hmm. And then, what does that look like for staff time? Are we going to have an FTE to take care of that? I mean, how does that all look? And make sure that we have a full understanding of, by doing these additional things, what that's going to look like for staff time. The sharing of authority was an interesting one, and for me I was curious if by saying that they were saying they wanted to have a voice in the decision-making process, be part of the decision that's being made. So we often hear, they have these amazing ideas, and many ideas that we have come from our community. And so was it that they wanted to just be part of that process, part of that decision-making process, or did they really want to have authority to say, this is what we're going to do, and be the voting person? So I'd be curious to know a little bit more about that. The timing in which we do the appointments to the boards and commission, I'd leave that, staff time, I leave that to kind of you guys to make that decision. But one thing that did raise me to think about was, we talk about the work that we do regionally, which is critically important for the city of Bothell, is to continue to do the work that we've been doing regionally to have a voice. And a lot of those appointments, they ask for those appointments early, prior to January. And so, as an example, in an election year, we'll know who is going to be seated. So is it something that council may want to have the ability to do that early, so that they can, then those folks could go, whoever the newly electeds are, could be part of that right from the start and be introduced to other local and regional leaders around. So just something that came up when we talk about appointments, that might be something in the future we want to take a look at as well. Splitting the terms was I think that's a great way to accomplish reducing staff time, but it might be something looking at doing a split where you have a 2 and a 4, or maybe you have 2 2s and 2 4s or whatever. So maybe look at that approach as well, and create some offsetting there, so it's every couple years during the same election cycle anyway. The Shorelines Board, I know they typically don't have a work plan, but is it possible for them to have, or for us to have, a board or commission that works with the projects that we potentially could have in the coming future for the Sammamish River, along the Sammamish River? And we're hearing about a lot of the channelizations and things like that we want to do. Is that something that board might be able to multitask and do as well? And then lastly, we don't know what we don't know. And so I would love to hear more about other cities around the region, the types of boards and commissions, the types of manuals that they have for those boards and commissions. And maybe we can take some of their templates and things that they're working on and discuss those and see if that might help streamline our process here. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much. It's a lot of work. Going at this point in time, everybody asked, and I agree with everything that was said. I just wanted to ask you about the timeline of when we were thinking about doing these things, or is it still up in the air? We don't know until we have more concrete answers.
I think we plan to come back relatively soon with some more firm recommendations based on your feedback. I don't know how long it would take us to actually accomplish all the code changes that would need to be done for particular changes, but I think we're planning on coming back.
Yeah, I think the thought was not knowing what type of feedback we'd hear tonight, and I think it's been a very helpful to go through the list of what sounds good. Really would dictate of when it would come back, but the intention is to say, okay, here's what we think we heard, and then come back with some proposed changes that would be for consideration again in study sessions, so that you'd have a chance to say, yep, got it right or not, and then the third touch would be for consideration and a vote. So we can debrief after tonight and find a date to bring it back, and I'm happy to. I think we can provide an update to that at our next meeting, so that everybody knows what the timeline looks like.
I didn't mean to put pressure on you. I'm just asking, are we talking about a year, 2 years, 5 years?
No, what I heard was just for clarity, and I do think that there will be a lot of community interest. And again, as Becky mentioned, when you go out and you survey people and ask for their opinion, they want to know what you're going to do with it. And so part of it is also making sure that we have information to be able to say what we're going to do with it. I would say that there's probably some of these recommendations that we will have to stage over time. Like if we do change the appointment timeline and that sort of thing, or even for city code changes, I want to make sure that we're meeting with the city attorney's office and work that in. So that's, I think, part of that second touch is to come back. We're going to talk about annual work plans and board and commissions. We have to have our work plan of what that looks like. So we'll come back with a clear outline of what are some things that we can do relatively quickly. You know, Becky mentioned things like that there are some more administrative side that we will probably update council on, but certainly doesn't take council approval for. So we'll call those out and put together a schedule on that as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, because if there's any... if we talk about compensation, which I agree with, we talk about all the additional processes and admin time. If that's a budget conversation, then probably need to talk about it sooner rather than later, you know. The DEI committee, I thought it was going to become permanent. I wasn't sure what the thing, but if it's not, there are no plans to make it permanent, I'd love for it to be a permanent thing. Human Services is a committee is also an interesting idea, maybe combined with the DEI committee if we don't want to have too many. I love the PDs. I heard about it last week, so you know I already voiced my appreciation to the chief. The question, and when you know the way it was stated that you know the folks who were interviewed wanted to have authority to co-create vision and policy, at my reaction is like, what about us? Like we just went through the difficult task of being here, you know. But then Councilmember McNeil was talking about maybe we do have this annual meeting after we get our act together in the beginning of the year. We sit with them and talk about, okay, here's what we're thinking about, and talking about the projects for the next year or two. You know, I think that's a good thing because we can't do all the work ourselves. We need all the help we can get. One question I had also at the top is I know I don't know how many we're legally required to have. Are all of the boards and commissions that we have today? Are they all required?
No, there's only a few that are actually required by RCW, and most of them are just written in our Bothell Municipal Code. So Planning Commission's required, and left one, civil service, salary. I think that's it.
LTAC.
Oh, LTAC, yes.
Wow. Good to hear your voice, Paul. It's like, oof, a voice from above.
Sorry.
Cool.
Don't apologize, Paul. We love it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't know, because so if we decide to add committees and we go through work plans and all that, like that's additional overhead. Maybe if once we decide what we want as a city to do in the future, maybe we can start determining, do we require all those boards and commissions, aside from the ones that are required by RCW, and then determine, because it's like as a long-term need, like you do a CFP or a comp plan, it's like for the next 20 years, what do we need help with type thing. So maybe a longer-term conversation around, there's the tactical stuff, the operations, but then there's a longer-term strategic needs that the city needs beyond, we're doing comp plan here in a couple of years. Maybe that could be part of that conversation. I don't know.
Councilmember Aldrich, did you have something else to say?
Councilmember Dodd first, please.
All right, Councilmember Dodd.
Okay, I'll try to make it worth going first. So, well, thanks again. I realize I already said that, but gosh, it's so much work. Like, it's just great feedback too. I wanted to add to talk about the shared vision that everybody's touched on. I realize I didn't touch on that. Coming from planning, every year we work on sort of a docket with our staff liaison, and it's staff says, here's what you have to work on. And then we're like, what about this fun stuff? Because we're all planning nerds. That's why we're on the commission. And then it goes to council, and then it comes back as like the final form, right? And I didn't realize that not every board and commission did that. So I think that would be an amazing thing for every board and commission to do. Because otherwise, how do you know what you're supposed to be doing? Like I just imagine sharing it and be like, so what's new with you? So that seems like a great idea. And I also really like what our deputy mayor said about sort of a long-term vision, because I realized that I'm like, yeah, let's pay people, let's record every meeting and put it on YouTube, and let's do these visions and everything. Like, that's a lot. I do get that. I want you to know that. So if we can think of like, what is our perfect dream for our boards and commissions, and then plan out how we get there, that sounds amazing. You could call it the commission vision and it would rhyme. It would be awesome. So don't do that. But
I'm writing it down.
So I love the idea of more of a long-term plan. So we're not feeling rushed. We're not, so we can kind of think, okay, this is a great idea, but is it possible right now? Is it possible in 5 years or 5 months? I'm just kidding. So that is my thought there. And then the other thing about recording the meetings and why I feel so passionate about it is, before I applied for planning commission, I had this idea, and I might burst some bubbles here, that like people on city council, people on the boards and commissions were like very grown-ups. Like you think, oh yeah, those are people who are very together, and they, and then you start to meet them and you're like, wow, these people are just like me. Like, oh my goodness. And it feels more possible. And then like I went to planning commission meetings, and I remember I gave my first public comment, and I was just so nervous. And then it gets easier, and then you realize this is just something that you do when you're engaged in your city, and it's important work, and everybody should feel comfortable doing it. So the more we can show them, hey, look, like we flub our lines, all the time, like skeptic versus septic and all that stuff. So like I think just showing people what happens at these meetings, and that you can be a part of it if you would like to, is so important. So that's part of why I feel so passionate about that. I just want to be clear. So thank you.
That's great feedback.
I'm glad you went first. Thanks. So just to kind of go off of, not to contradict the deputy mayor, but to kind of add some nuance to what I heard him say. I think that when we're talking about co-creating roles, the vision that the deputy mayor kind of described, it matches most the best of how I kind of see it, as opposed to some of the other things I've heard tonight. And that would be that boards and commission members have the opportunity to advise on policy, and submit like ideas and put their creativity into plans that then come to us, and that we are then able to take that under advisement. And that's my understanding of how boards and commissions are supposed to work. They're not necessarily, making elected, officials and policy, but they are proposing policy that then has a process. And I really like what the deputy mayor said about council participation in the annual joint workshop. I don't know if that had initially been intended, but I know that that's how I would like it to go, so that, when all the boards and commissions get together after our priority setting, we're then able to kind of connect the dots and put it together, right? I remember when we did our priority setting, there was a lot of but I really want to talk to the Arts Commission, and I really want to talk to the Parks Commission. And then because I just mentioned those two things, I want to make clear the distinction between legally required boards and commissions, because of statutory expectations, and how a number of the boards and commissions that we have are really designed to reflect our values and to promote culture in our city. And the state may not require us to do that, but it really gives it makes Bothell who we are when people can contribute to a vision for our community that is rooted in our values, and that is celebrating and honoring the culture that we co-create here together. And so that is sort of when we're talking philosophy, that's what I think, is that there may be these required ones that, are very, very business oriented and have, very clear regulations on them. But we're also creating a vision for our community. And that's where those cultural values-based boards and commissions are coming from. And so I never want to diminish them because they're not required. I think that that's where a lot of the heart is in our community. Wouldn't want to lose them. I also didn't hear a recommendation that any boards or commissions could be combined. I didn't hear you say that we could combine these two, or we could get I haven't heard any of those recommendations. Do you have any of those?
Well, there was a lot of discussion about the Shorelines Board, and would it make more sense to make it a subcommittee of the Planning Commission, or could it be merged in with Planning Commission? That's really the only merge or combo that staff really thought would work, or we had a sense might work. The other ones were just really difficult.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm gonna go. And then we can keep going among the rounds. I think we're halfway through seconds. There were a couple big themes that came out of the comments that we heard. Our boards and commissioners want to do more, and they want more direction from us so they know what to do. And I find both of those things to be incredibly encouraging and reasonable requests. We've got really capable, really involved people, and we aren't facilitating for them. And I really appreciate the tone of the report, because we all know where we're at with this, right? There's no pretense that we've got this nailed or anything. We know that this is kind of broken and we need to fix it. And I appreciate the humility that you guys are coming to us with. So thank you for that. Big picture, I want our boards to feel like their work makes a difference in their sphere. I want them to feel like they can move the needle. And if they have to work on fewer things, but those things are things that are very impactful and they're things that they have a say in what they're doing, I feel like that would matter more than here's the just stuff that's going to council here before too long and we have to do something on. I would love for them to be able to have a voice in kind of what that looks like. And I have no idea how any of this will happen, just so you know. That's your job. But I really I think it was Councilmember Dodd brought up the Planning Commission model, and it's not going to work exactly like that with every board, but where they talk about things they care about, things come to us, we make a final decision on kind of what they're going to work on. We do it together. And then when the work actually happens, they see it before we do. You know, it feels like a much more joint relationship with the Planning Commission than it does with any other board. And I would like to feel that way with all of the boards. We have really, like, every time we do interviews, I remember the first year I was on council, we did interviews, and I was just blown away at the talent level. I remember sitting there thinking, like, I would vote for half of these people over me. Like, this is amazing. And in terms of, I have a weird combination of, like, my thoughts and answers to your questions here. I'm just going in order on my list. In terms of sharing authority and co-creating vision, policy, and solutions, yeah. I mean, like I said, I want our boards and commissions to feel like they can move the needle, to feel like they can change things to some extent. You know, there are boards and commissions, and we have the final vote. So, like, you know, I'm not super worried about things going completely sideways with that, and I recognize there's an opportunity for that to go in a couple different directions. But I feel like that's good, and that's helping people get more involved. And I think it's funny that, staff brought up civic training and a pathway for more public involvement, and the boards didn't. Like, raise your hand if you joined a board, and then a few years later you ended up here. Like, how did that work? And it's really encouraging seeing all these talented people, and I don't want to burn them out, because those are the people that are going to be up here someday. Those are the people that are making their community a better place, and that's really cool. I have one small concern about aligning with council terms. If we do it, what I don't want to do is I don't want to have, like, all of the boards and commissions up right after a council election term, because continuity is good, and I don't want the opportunity for something to change and then suddenly a new voice comes on council and, like, everybody goes away for their friends, kind of a thing. I don't think that would happen, but, like, you're nodding, so I should let you talk.
Well, I think I probably wasn't clear on that. Boards and commissions, they'll be rolling off all the time.
Cool.
So their terms won't match council terms. It's just they'll have a 2 or a 4-year term. So they'll be continually rolling on and off. I probably wasn't clear on that.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
I'm glad I stopped ranting and let you clarify. I would love the bodies to attend council meetings once a year, and I think liaisons to those bodies is a good idea as well. I do think us regularly attending the meetings isn't a great idea, because bluntly, we tilt the room when we're in there, and we go to so many meetings. Like, I don't need to go to any more meetings. I love the, like, joint meeting workshop of all boards and commissions. My only thought is, like, why just annual? Why not more than that? Like, I feel like it would be cool to have a couple meetings a year, like one where we talk about, like, you know, vision and an agenda, and another one where we talk about, like, how's it going? What do you need? Like, maybe we do a check-in midway through the year and talk to them and get feedback. And maybe if things are going sideways, we don't just find out the next year when we meet and talk about what we did this last year. Which probably jives, because all of us are like, more. And you guys are like, ah. Councilmember Dodd, I really appreciate having you here, because I don't feel like I talk 5 times faster than everybody else up here now. Appreciate it. Just a coordination. Would love to have them be involved in events. I think that's also something that can give them a sense of civic pride in their work. Like, I remember I got to go to a couple events when I was on the Parks Board, and I got to wear a little name tag with the Parks Board, and it was cool. I liked it. Like, I enjoyed it. Thanks for the name tag, Nick. When you talked about the board members requesting more staff time and attention, those are probably the people who will be the best served by better defining what this is and what the roles are. Because when you said that, my first thought was those are the people that show up that want to do stuff, that want to get something done, and they're not sure how, and they're flailing around because they want to accomplish something, and they want to get something done. And if you could give me a list of the names of all of those people, that would be great. I would love to meet them. In terms of pay, if we don't pay people at least enough to pay for childcare for the meeting, we are excluding young families from participating. And I don't like that. We are also excluding people who would need to take time off work, that work in the evenings. And I don't like that either. I would like to do something. That is my list. There's not a lot of questions in there, just feedback. But thank you. Becky, I have a question for you. Whenever we start talking about a project that is like undefined exactly which like department would go under, do you just think to yourself, well, it's just a matter of time? Because we have this strategy of like, we don't know where to put this thing. Let's have Becky do it. So thank you.
We're good. And the clerks are also very involved in board commissions, and they're super helpful, so.
Awesome. Did you? Okay.
All right, just one quick thing. Shorelines, you mentioned shorelines. That is, knowing who's sitting on shoreline right now, that's an incredible brain trust. I think another person, I don't know all the members on all the boards and commissions, but I know that we have a member on Parks who would also bring a lot to the shoreline discussion, have that bank of knowledge. And so if you want to make shorelines a subcommittee, great, but I don't want to see them go away because that is a huge brain trust that's very, very important to our whole focus in salmon recovery and healthy shores. And so I wanted to make that point that shorelines needs a place, and it may find some other allies in some other boards and commissions as well.
Thank you for making that point. That was on my mind earlier, and I didn't get it in my list. But yeah, we've got a phenomenal amount of expertise on that specific subject matter in the Shorelines Board. All right. It looks like we are clamming up. And I was totally not ready. Council Conversations is up next. Councilmember Dodd.
Thank you. I had two things I wanted to ask about. So earlier, we were all reminded that I don't have any like external committee, commission, whatever appointments. And I know that former Councilmember Doerr had some and they were absorbed. So if anybody is overloaded or doesn't like something, feel free to pick on me. And I don't know how we reassign things, but turns out I have availability. So I'm here to support you in that. Maybe nothing terrible, but I realize the new person can't be choosy, so that's fine. And then the other thing is, one thing that I used to like to go to before the pandemic was council conversations at the library. And I would love to volunteer to help staff that as a council member, but I don't really know how we get that started or who does the organizing. I'm going to guess Becky based on, but so I just wanted to throw that out there and see if anybody else was interested or if, just kind of where everybody's at. So thanks.
Yes, this is something, I don't know if I've brought it up with you or not, but I've been thinking, nope, okay. I want to do something like that. We have some housing stuff coming up, and I think it would be a really good idea just to give the community an opportunity to show up and just have a conversation rather than public comment and everybody talks and we clam up and don't respond. So that's something I am absolutely enthusiastic about doing as well.
I'll take it a step further. Since we're having the housing thing, going to each community, not just having it central in the library, at the library, and going in different neighborhoods, maybe renting a school gym or something, and talking, getting folks to show up.
This is a conversation that I've had with staff, And my understanding, and well, you guys aren't involved in this conversation, I'm sorry. So my understanding is that that is a political effort and not a city-sponsored effort. And so when Councilmember Dewar was doing those, she was doing those in an individual capacity and sometimes coordinating with other council members. But that would be sort of, my understanding is an off-the-dais kind of planning thing. And because I have talked to staff about it, I do have some thoughts, and even maybe sort of had some initial planning sessions with myself. And then had some disruptions with life that I wasn't able to get to them. But I'm happy to have those conversations and coordinate with council members. I do think that they were a really integral part for me as a community member to see that, like you said, council people and boards and commissioners are normal people. And they care about our community. And so I attended a few of those, and it really did inspire me to get more involved in the city. So I'd very much like to bring them back.
I was going to tease you about using normal.
I was going to say the same thing. I was like, I don't know if I'd say normal, but
Similar. to most-
Interesting
I know where you're going.
and unique people that inspired me to do good.
Yeah.
Thank
No,
you.
I didn't realize it wasn't like a city thing. So that's good to know. Although that'll be interesting to try and organize, I guess. And I would love I love the idea of going to the community, like living in the Snohomish County part of the city, growing up there. I came down here for the library, and that was it. I think I went to the park at Bothell Landing twice as a child, and I was otherwise, going to Logan Park and other places. So I love that idea a lot that the deputy mayor had. And I don't know how we do that, but even just if we can, because I know we can't all be at a place without lots of coordination and announcements and things, but I would love for us to do that in a less formal capacity than our meetings, to just be there for the community, steal the police department's idea of coffee with a cop, coffee with council members. You could make fun of our orders and how much I like oat milk, just different things that we can, that we can do to be out there. Because we want people to know that we're regular people, and we want to hear from them.
Okay. Thank you, Rami. He's like, just talk. Thank you. Coffee with a cop is what came to mind, coffee with a council member, although I think we need some sort of draw, would Roe come, something to bring, and, everybody loves to come pet a dog. And who doesn't love coffee? So it would be great to do something, don't have high expectations for a huge community turnout, but it would be lovely to, every 2-3 months, have coffee with a couple council members, rotate, say, okay, you two, it's your turn up at Woods. Something like that, where we could just update the community on things that council's doing, get people's thoughts on things, hear from them on their thoughts about what's going on in their neighborhood, especially if we can hit the northern part of the city. That would be fantastic. So, yeah, coffee with a council member. Just, Chief, tell us how to do it, to draw them in.
He'll call up Cam in a second. There's like, hey, Cam, I need you. Question. And if we decide to have this kind of conversation, and we happen to have 4 council members show up, I know there's legalities around this, but then, how do we do it? How do we do it?
I've been warned not to be drawn into your council conversations, but
you
laid down the opportunity, so I'll walk in. I think this is, I have heard from Councilmember Aldrichs on this. This is the first time that there's been some momentum. Be happy to tee up some options. What I've heard said can be true, of that, yes, there are times when, as a political activity, all 7 of you and some others will be out in the community doing things. And we can look at some options and opportunities to get out in the community to hear from people where they live in different settings. I was just sharing with Becky, again, I used to work in this place that started with a B down the road from here. And in the summers, we would do community walks with the executive leadership team. Sorry, folks. And then council members were invited too. And we would find like 5 different neighborhoods or geographic areas and do walks or meet in parks and that sort of a thing and advertise it. And it was a public meeting out in the community. So there's things like that that we can do. And I'm so happy to bring options. If there are things that don't align with city resources, you'll, again, that you exist as political entities too, and we'll let you figure out how you want to do it. But certainly if there's an interest from all, in particular from all 7, happy to tee up some options, and we'll bring that back in like some sort of staff report, certainly not during council conversations, which is our all ears. So I'll be quiet now.
A walk, you say?
I didn't say a bike ride, Mayor.
Oh, no, I was just thinking that one of our planning commissioners already does a walk around housing that I know we've brought staff on before, and that might be a good opportunity to kind of show people in the community what we're talking about as part of our upcoming discussion.
I have no pride. I would love to steal that idea from the other city down the road that starts with a B. I can tell you that I'm just thinking of neighborhoods that if we announced that we're going to be at your park, there would be people that would show up and would drag us to go point things out. So I love that idea.
On a similar vein, but slightly different, I'm wondering what council thinks of, I don't know how this would be executed, so just let me lay the idea out there.
I think you just signed up.
If we were to take city council to different places around the city twice a year, once a quarter, I don't know what's feasible, but hold city council meetings at a school in the community that would make it easier for people to show up to. I don't know what kind of attendance we get. I don't know what kind of reaction we get, but I don't think that I'm aware of anybody's ever done that before. So I don't know. Just want to throw it out there as an idea and see what others think.
The city of Bothell, I'm old enough to know this, but the city of Bothell has done that, but that was back in the days before things were televised, so.
Yeah, I don't know if we just bring a camera with us and connect. No. Yeah, maybe it's not possible now that everything is.
Everybody's got a smartphone. No, I think that's a great idea, and I wonder if it's an opportunity to do more of a. It's an oxymoron, but like a fun meeting. Like maybe we're not doing utility rate increases that meeting. Maybe we're, having a.
Hey, that was fun.
Well, listen, we all love to hear Boyd Benson talk, so that's always a delight.
You know what? His excitement about the sewer technology rubs off on me. I have to be honest.
It has given me an interest that I did not know I had.
I'm really, to be honest.
And you know what? I have absolutely zero concern that any of them are watching right now.
Oh, they're rewatching it.
But the boss is right there, so I think.
No, but that's awesome. So if we can do offer some free food, some free coffee. People will come just for that, right? And then we will stun them with our amazing meetings. But for serious though, it's a great idea, and I love the idea of going to people, just because I feel like it can be a barrier just to get down here at a set time and kind of feel like you have a reason to go and take attention. Like Pacific Northwesterners sometimes don't like to draw attention to themselves, so if we can help encourage people to show up by doing different things, like that can only bring cool stuff.
Okay, I just thought of something. We need the arts committee on this, but it would be lovely in whatever avenue that we have meet with communities, if it's a park walk or whatever, have a thing that particular neighborhood participates in adding their touch to, and it gets carried to the next. It gets carried to the next community. I know. There was it handprint? What was it that Art was doing on one of our arts nights? But something like that would be it's their idea of coming up with something that would be workable. But it'd be lovely to have something that gets carried around to different parts of the city, and the community gets to put their touch on it, and then it's part of one single piece. So.
The other city with a B has, and I literally just on the way from my work to Crossroads to return something, so I don't know a lot about Bellevue, but they have tiles on the side of a road that are at each neighborhood. imagine an art installation that everybody worked on that, like something like that would be cool.
When you said the other city with a B, it's like, what is that?
Are we not allowed to say Bellevue? Everybody else was doing it, so I just didn't want to, I think I lost the game.
That's a good idea, Amanda. I think you might have support from somebody sitting directly to your left whose name rhymes with Gene Zorns, but I'm not saying who it is.
Totally, because I'm waiting for the first neighborhood to put up their sign blade, and I'm thinking it might be mine. I would love neighborhoods to build their identity and ownership. Yeah, anything we can do, that would be great.
I have 2 points to that. Conifer View did that. We have these lovely signs that were crowdsourced by members of the neighborhood and were put up at the entrances on both sides. And one of them still stands. The other one got taken out by, I think, somebody doing donuts in the road, as well as a tree. So thank you, Public Works, for making our median safe. And then the other point, I'm not opposed to having council meetings in the community. I think that there is something very powerful about taking City Hall to the people and not making people come to City Hall. But I also, another concept that was discussed with in my one-on-ones with the city manager was the idea of town halls and forums that, we don't need to do them just when we're running for office. We could do them twice a year in the community and take turns where we are in neighborhoods. So that's one thing. I do also want to get back to your point about commissions, though. I just feel like, or about committees. But let's kind of get through this part of how we can increase engagement and make ourselves more accessible to members of the community.
So we just talked. Are we going to do something about this by ourselves? How do we start to keep it, minimize staff time, and maximize our time in the community? How can we get started?
We'll come back with some thoughts
Oh,
in the
okay.
next couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe we ought to let that idea simmer for a while. And then I have a question. As much as I love you all, we could in theory be out before 10 if we do it within the next 10 minutes. So,
Seconded. Or
and I think we might be getting a little bit rummy. And you guys are just hanging on by a thread. So, I don't know. I'm game for more talking, but
We're cracking jokes up here. They're like, I want to go home.
Before we sign off, I just want to say happy birthday, Councilmember Alders.
Yes.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I appreciate that. No, please no. I appreciate the reminder of anniversaries of previous birthdays. That way you don't ever actually have to say what it is. But can we spend a couple minutes talking about committees? Because I think there is a new council member on our council who really likes transportation issues. And do I have some transportation committees for you?
So not to pull you back in, Mr. City Manager, but can people email me and say, I don't want this? Or do they have to go through you? Or what is the...
Sounds like we'll talk about that and offline, and I'll work with the city clerk's office to get some information to council on what you might want to consider.
Okay, thank you.
I think Councilmember Alders currently is on like half of the boards and the commissions that we have to go to for council, so I'm sure she would love to give you some.
Don't give me half of your half.
It's not that bad, and I actually really enjoy them, and I only signed up for ones that I wanted to be on. But I'll share. I'm really glad you're here.
All right, let's go.